A thief vanishes with a blood-red ruby, but Miss Marple sees what no one else can. Who's hiding the village's deadly secret? Why does the knave fear her every step? And what lurks in the shadows of this deadly chase? Chapter 1. The curious case of the vanished heirloom. The late summer sun draped St. Mary Mead in a golden haze, its rays filtering through the lace curtains of Miss Jane Marple's modest cottage. The air carried the scent of blooming roses from her garden, mingling with the faint aroma of freshly brewed Earl Grey. Miss Marple, seated in her favorite chintz-covered armchair, poured tea into a delicate porcelain cup, her movements precise yet unhurried. At 72, her eyes remained sharp, her mind sharper still, attuned to the subtle rhythms of village life. Today, however, those rhythms were disrupted. The village buzzed with news of a theft at Ashford Manor, the grandest estate in St. Mary Mead. Lady Eleanor Ashford's prized sapphire brooch, a family heirloom worth a small fortune, had vanished from her dressing-room the previous night. The local constable, a well-meaning but plodding man named Higgs, had already questioned the household, but the gossip at the post office suggested no progress. Miss Marple, though not one for idle chatter, had overheard enough to pique her curiosity. The brooch, described as a starburst of deep blue gems set in gold, was not merely valuable, it was a symbol of the Ashford legacy, passed down through generations. As she sipped her tea, a knock rattled the cottage door. Miss Marple set her cup down, her lips curving into a faint smile. Visitors were rare this early, and she suspected this one bore news of the theft. She rose, smoothing her tweed skirt, and opened the door to find Mrs. Clara Bantry, her closest friend and the most excitable resident of St. Mary Mead. "Oh, Jane, you'll never believe the scandal." Mrs. Bantry burst in, her wide-brimmed hat askew. "Lady Ashford is beside herself. That brooch gone. And they say it happened right under everyone's noses at last night's dinner party." Miss Marple gestured toward the sofa, her calm demeanor a counterpoint to Mrs. Bantry's agitation. "Do sit, Clara, and tell me everything. A cup of tea, perhaps?" Mrs. Bantry waved off the offer, collapsing onto the cushions. "No time for tea, Jane. The manor's in an uproar. Higgs is poking about, but he's as useful as a wet match. Lady Ashford insists it's an outsider, some thief who slipped in during the party, but I'm not so sure. The staff's acting awfully cagey, especially that new footman, Clarence." Miss Marple's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Clarence? I don't recall the name exactly." Mrs. Bantry leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He's only been at the manor a month. Shifty eyes, if you ask me. Always hovering, never quite meeting your gaze. And last night I saw him lingering near the staircase to Lady Ashford's rooms during the dessert course. Suspicious, don't you think?" Miss Marple nodded thoughtfully, her fingers tapping the armrest. "Suspicious, yes, but not conclusive. Tell me about the party. Who was there?" Mrs. Bantry launched into a vivid recounting. The dinner had been a lavish affair, hosted to celebrate Lady Ashford's nephew, Captain Henry Ashford, returning from his naval post in Gibraltar. The guest list included local gentry Sir Geoffrey Tate, the vicar and his wife, the widowed Mrs. Lavender, as well as a few outsiders, a London art dealer named Mr. Percival Wren, and a distant cousin, Miss Beatrice Ashford, who'd arrived unexpectedly. The manor's staff, including Clarence, the butler Mr. Grayson, and the housekeeper Mrs. Poole, had served a 7-course meal, with music from a hired string quartet. The brooch was definitely there before dinner, Mrs. Bantry said. Lady Ashford wore it, pinned to her gown. She took it off afterward, saying it was too heavy for dancing. She left it in her dressing-room, locked in a velvet case. This morning, poof. Case empty, no sign of forced entry. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. No forced entry? And the window? Locked from the inside, Higgs says. It's baffling, Jane. Lady Ashford's threatening to call Scotland Yard, but Sir Geoffrey thinks it's bad form to air the family's troubles. Miss Marple stood, her mind already turning over the details. I think, Clara, I'd like to pay Lady Ashford a visit. A theft like this is distressing, and perhaps a fresh perspective might ease her mind. Mrs. Bantry clapped her hands. I knew you'd take an interest. Shall I come along? Better not, Miss Marple said gently. Too many visitors might overwhelm her. But do keep your ears open at the village shop. People talk when they think no one's listening. An hour later, Miss Marple approached Ashford Manor, her sensible shoes crunching on the gravel drive. The estate loomed ahead, its Georgian facade soft by ivy and flanked by manicured lawns. A peacock strutted across the grass, its tail feathers glinting in the sunlight. The air held a faint tang of wood smoke, likely from the gardener's burning leaves. Miss Marple noted the scene's tranquillity, a stark contrast to the chaos within. The butler, Mr. Grayson, greeted her at the door. A tall man in his 50s with a perpetually dour expression, he bowed stiffly. Miss Marple. Lady Ashford is in the drawing-room. She's unwell, but she see you. Thank. You, Mr. Grayson, Miss Marple said, stepping into the grand hall. Her eyes swept the space-polished oak floors, a chandelier dripping with crystal, a portrait of a stern Ashford ancestor. She noticed a faint scuff mark on the baseboard near the staircase, barely visible, but out of place in the immaculate manor. Filing it away, she followed Grayson to the drawing-room. Lady Eleanor Ashford sat by a bay window, a shawl draped over her shoulders despite the warm day. Her face, lined with worry, brightened slightly at Miss Marple's entrance. Miss Marple, how kind of you to come. This dreadful business has me quite undone. Miss Marple took a seat opposite, her expression sympathetic. I heard about the brooch, Lady Ashford, a terrible loss. Might you tell me what happened? Lady Ashford recounted the evening, her voice trembling. The brooch, a gift from her late husband, had been her pride. She'd worn it to impress Mr. Wren, the art dealer who'd expressed interest in valuing the Ashford collection. After dinner, she'd placed it in its case, locked it, and left the key on her dressing table. The next morning the case was empty, the key untouched. And you suspect a stranger? Miss Marple asked. It must be, Lady Ashford said. The staff are loyal. Mrs. Poole has been with us 20 years, Grayson longer. Even Clarence, though new, came highly recommended. Miss Marple nodded, though her mind lingered on Clarence. Might I see the dressing-room? Lady Ashford hesitated, then rang a bell. Mrs. Poole, the housekeeper, appeared a stout woman with a tight bun and a wary gaze. Show Miss Marple upstairs, please. The dressing-room was a feminine sanctuary with rosewood furniture and a mirrored vanity cluttered with perfumes. The velvet case sat open, its silk lining empty. Miss Marple examined the window, its latch secure, then the lock on the case, which showed no scratches. She knelt, peering at the carpet near the window. A faint smudge of dirt caught her eye, shaped like the edge of a shoe. She glanced at Mrs. Poole, who hovered by the door. "Does the staff clean here daily?" Miss Marple asked. "Every morning," Mrs. Poole said, her tone clipped. "I oversee it myself." "And last night was anything unusual? Guests wandering, perhaps?" Mrs. Poole's lips pursed. "Everyone was in the ballroom, dancing. Except, well, Mr. Wren excused himself briefly, said he needed air. And Miss Beatrice was late to the dancing, fussing with her gown." Miss Marple thanked her and returned downstairs, her mind buzzing. The scuff mark in the hall, the dirt smudge, Mrs. Poole's defensiveness, small threads, but they wove a pattern. She needed more. That afternoon, Miss Marple lingered in the village, stopping at the library to borrow a book on gemstones. The librarian, Miss Finch, was a font of gossip. "Heard about the manor?" she whispered. "They say Clarence was seen at the station this morning, buying a ticket to London. Odd, since he's not due a day off." Miss Marple's pulse quickened. "Indeed? Did he say why?" "Not a word. Just paid and left, looking over his shoulder like the devil was after him." Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sat by the fire, knitting a scarf as her thoughts unraveled the day's clues. The scuff mark suggested someone had brushed against the baseboard, perhaps in haste. The dirt smudge hinted at an outdoor entry, despite the locked window. Clarence's sudden departure was damning, yet too obvious. A clever thief wouldn't flee so openly, unless provoked or framed, she recalled Mrs. Bantry's mention of Clarence near the staircase. The manor's layout placed the staircase near a side door, often left unlocked for servants. If Clarence had slipped upstairs during the party, he could have reached the dressing room unnoticed. But why leave the key? A professional would have taken it to delay discovery. Miss Marple's needles clicked rhythmically. Another possibility nagged her. The book on poisons she'd noticed in the manor's library, slightly askew on the shelf. It seemed unrelated, yet its placement near a window overlooking the side door felt deliberate. Had someone used it as a signal? Or a distraction? The next morning, Miss Marple returned to the manor, armed with a pretext. She'd forgotten her gloves. Lady Ashford, still pale, welcomed her. "Any news, Miss Marple?" "Nothing certain," she said. "But I wonder if I might speak with Mr. Grayson?" Grayson appeared, his demeanor as stiff as his starched collar. Miss Marple smiled disarmingly. "Mr. Grayson, you oversaw the staff last night. Was Clarence reliable during the party?" Grayson's jaw tightened. "He did his duties, kept to himself, mostly." "And did he leave the ballroom at any point?" A flicker of unease crossed Grayson's face. "I couldn't say. It was a busy evening." Miss Marple thanked him, noting his reluctance. She wandered to the library, ostensibly to admire the books. The poison volume was still askew. She pulled it out, revealing a folded paper tucked behind it. Heart pounding, she unfolded it and note in hurried script. "The knave holds the key. London, midnight dot." She pocketed the note, her mind racing. Clarence was the obvious knave, but the note's placement suggested someone else knew his plans. A trap or a taunt? That evening, Miss Marple sat with Lady Ashford, sharing her findings. I believe Clarence is involved, but not alone. This note suggests she's fled to London, perhaps to sell the brooch. I'd like to follow, with your blessing." Lady Ashford clasped her hands. "Oh, Miss Marple, you've given me hope. Please, do what you must." Miss Marple smiled, her eyes glinting with resolve. "I shall. And I suspect, Lady Ashford, we'll find more than just a brooch at the end of this trail." As she left the manor, the peacock screeched, its cry echoing in the dusk. Miss Marple tightened her shawl, her mind already in London, chasing a knave through fog and shadows. The brooch was merely the beginning, a sparkling lure in a game of wits she intended to win. Chapter 2. A trail through the fog, the train to London rattled through the countryside, its rhythm a counterpoint to the flurry of Miss Jane Marple's thoughts. Seated in a second-class compartment, she gazed out at the rolling fields, now shrouded in early morning mist. Her gloved hands rested on a small leather valise containing essentials, a change of clothes, her knitting, and the cryptic note found behind the book on poisons at Ashford Manor. The knave holds the key. London, midnight. The words looped in. Her mind, each syllable a puzzle piece, yet to fit. At 72, Miss Marple was no stranger to travel, though she preferred the quiet lanes of St. Mary Mead to the clamor of the capital. Yet the theft of Lady Ashford's sapphire brooch demanded pursuit, and Clarence, the shifty footman, was her lead. His sudden flight to London, confirmed by the village librarian, suggested guilt or fear. The note hinted at a rendezvous, but with whom? And why leave it in the manor's library, unless to misdirect? The train lurched into Paddington Station, disgorging passengers into a swirl of steam and noise. Miss Marple stepped on to the platform, her tweed coat blending with this crowd. London's air was thick with coal smoke, its streets a labyrinth of cabs, omnibuses, and vendors hawking newspapers. She hailed a hansom cab, instructing the driver to take her to a modest boarding-house in Bloomsbury, recommended by her nephew Raymond for its discretion and proximity to the city's heart. Settled in her room, a Spartan affair with a creaky bed and a view of a sooty courtyard, Miss Marple unpacked her knitting and spread the note on the table. The handwriting was hurried, the ink cheap. The knave likely meant Clarence, but the key was ambiguous. The brooch itself, or something more? She recalled the scuff mark in Ashford Manor's hall, the dirt smudge by the dressing-room window. Clarence's access to the manor made him a plausible thief, but his brazen departure suggested desperation, not cunning. Her first task was to locate him. The librarian's gossip placed Clarence at Paddington, buying a ticket the morning after the theft. He'd likely arrived yesterday, giving him a day's head start. Miss Marple knew London's underbelly attracted men, like Clarence pawnshops, pubs and boarding-houses where questions were few and cash was king. She decided to start with pawnshops, reasoning a stolen brooch would be fenced quickly. Dressed in her most unassuming outfit, a pampquet, gray shawl, and a bonnet that shadowed her face, Miss Marple ventured into the East End. The streets grew narrower, the air heavier with the stench of refuse and fried fish. She navigated with a map tucked in her sleeve, her demeanor that of a harmless spinster. Her destination was Petticoat Lane, a market known for its dubious dealings. The lane teemed with life, costermongers shouting, children darting underfoot, women haggling over second-hand clothes. Miss Marple approached a pawn shop, tucked between a butcher and a gin palace. Its sign, faded and peeling, read Goldstein and Sons, valuables bought and sold. A bell jangled as she entered, revealing a dim interior cluttered with clocks, jewelry, and tarnished silver. Behind the counter stood a wiry man with spectacles perched on his nose, appraising a pocket watch. "Good morning," Miss Marple said, her voice mild. "I'm seeking a family heirloom, a sapphire brooch. Starburst design. Set in gold. I heard it might have passed through here." The pawnbroker, Mr. Goldstein, squinted at her. "Sapphires, eh? Rare thing that. What's your name, ma'am?" "Mrs. Finch," she lied smoothly, borrowing the librarian's name. "It belonged to my late sister. Stolen recently, I'm afraid." Goldstein's eyes flickered, a tell Miss Marple noted. "Haven't seen nothing like that. Sapphires don't come cheap, and I'd remember." She leaned closer, her tone confiding. "I'd pay handsomely for information, no questions asked." Goldstein hesitated, then lowered his voice. "A lad. Came in yesterday, nervy sort. Offered a brooch, blue stones, gold setting. Didn't like his look too jumpy, so I sent him packing. Try old Mordecai's place, 3 streets over. He's less particular." Miss Marple thanked him, slipping a shilling across the counter. Outside, she jotted Mordecai's in her notebook, her pulse quickening. Clarence had been here, or someone matching his description. The trail was warm. Mordecai's shop was seedier, its windows grimy and barred. Inside, a stooped man with a beard like tangled wire sorted through a tray of rings. Miss Marple repeated her story, adding a tremble to her voice for effect. Mordecai's reaction was immediate. He stiffened, his fingers pausing over the tray. "A brooch, you say?" His accent was thick, his eyes shrewd. "Describe it." She did, emphasizing the starburst pattern. Mordecai nodded slowly. "A piece like that came through. Sold it quick, to a gent who didn't haggle. Didn't catch his name, but he had a fancy cane, silver-tipped." Miss Marple's mind raced. A gentleman buyer? Not Clarence, then, but perhaps his contact. This lad who sold it young, dark hair, nervous? Mordecai shrugged. "Maybe. Didn't pay him much mind. He left a book, though, as collateral. Said he'd be back, but he ain't." "A book?" Miss Marple's interest sharpened. Mordecai rummaged under the counter, producing a slim volume bound in cracked leather, The Art of Ciphers. Miss Marple's breath caught. Codes and ciphers, a link to the note's cryptic phrasing. She offered to buy the book, but Mordecai waved. "Her off. Take it. Worthless to me." Back at the boarding house, Miss Marple pored over the book by lamplight. Its pages detailed substitution ciphers, transposition codes, and steganography. Tucked inside was a scrap of paper with numbers scrawled in pencil. The 22nd of March 14, 7 minus 12 minus 9. A code, perhaps, but without context, indecipherable. She turned to the note again. London, midnight. No location, no date. Frustrating, yet tantalizing. The next morning she visited the British Museum's reading room, seeking insight into ciphers. Posing as a scholar researching cryptography, she consulted a librarian, a young woman with ink-stained fingers. "These numbers," Miss Marple said, showing the scrap, "might they reference a book cipher?" The librarian adjusted her glasses. "Possibly. Each set the 22nd of March 14, for instance, could mean page 14, line 3, word 22. You'd need the right book, though. Miss Marple thanked her, her mind alight. The cipher book itself might be the key, but testing it would take time. She decided to pursue the buyer with the silver-tipped cane. Pawnbrokers often gossiped, and Goldstein had mentioned a network of dealers. She returned to Petticoat Lane, this time visiting a tea shop frequented by market folk. The tea shop was cramped, its air thick with tobacco and chatter. Miss Marple ordered a pot of Darjeeling and listened. At a nearby table, two men discussed. A fancy gent who'd been flashing cash at auctions. Silver cane, always twirling it, one said. Hangs about the Diogenes Club, they say. The Diogenes Club, a gentleman's haven known for its exclusivity. Miss Marple's heart skipped, a lead, solid, and promising. She finished her tea, leaving a generous tip to ensure the waitress's goodwill. That evening, she studied a map of London, circling the Diogenes Club's location in Pall Mall. Infiltrating it would be tricky women were barred, and her spinster. Guys wouldn't suffice. She considered her nephew Raymond a writer with connections, but dismissed the idea. This was her chase, and she relished the challenge. Before bed, Miss Marple tested the cipher, using the art of ciphers. Page 14, line 3, word 22, yielded meat. Page 7, line 12, word 9, gave, at. A partial message meet at but, the book's condition made further decoding unreliable. Still, it confirmed Clarence's involvement in something deeper than a simple theft. The brooch was a pawn in a larger game. The next day she visited a theatrical costumier in Covent Garden, renting a dowager's gown and a gray wig. Disguised as a wealthy widow, she planned to loiter near the Diogenes Club, hoping to spot the man with the cane. As she left the shop, a street urchin bumped into her, slipping a note into her hand before vanishing into the crowd. She unfolded it, her breath catching. Mind your step, old lady. The knave's not alone. No signature, but the threat was clear. Someone knew she was hunting. Clarence or his buyer? Fear prickled her spine, but she straightened, tucking the note away. Outside the Diogenes Club, Miss Marple lingered under a lamp-post, her parasol shielding her face. Carriages rolled by, disgorging men in top hats. At last a figure emerged, a tall man, impeccably dressed, twirling a silver-tipped cane. His face was obscured, but his gait was confident, almost arrogant. He hailed a cab and vanished into the fog. Miss Marple returned to her boarding house, her mind buzzing. The man with the cane was real, and the Diogenes Club was her next move. The threat only sharpened her resolve. She'd outsmarted knaves before, and this one, whoever he was, would be no exception. As she knitted by the fire, the fog pressed against her window, a gray curtain hiding London's secrets. Tomorrow she'd breach the club's walls, one way or another. The trail was treacherous, but Miss Marple thrived on such challenges, her quiet triumph a beacon in the gloom. Chapter 3. The Gentleman's Gambit. The Diogenes Club stood like a silent sentinel on Pall Mall, its austere facade a bulwark against the clamor of London. Its windows, shrouded in heavy drapes, betrayed no hint of the secrets within. Miss Jane Marple, clad in a borrowed dowager's gown of lavender silk, adjusted her gray wig and stepped from the hansom cab. Her heart beat a steady rhythm, undaunted by the anonymous threat slipped into her hand the previous day. "Mind your step, old lady. The knave's not alone." The words only fueled her resolve. At 72, she knew the power of appearing unremarkable. A spinster's invisibility was her sharpest weapon. The club barred women, a rule as rigid as its members' starched collars. Yet Miss Marple had a plan. Posing as the companion of an elderly viscountess, a fiction crafted with a forged letter of introduction, she aimed to infiltrate a charity tea hosted in the club's annex, where wives and companions of members were grudgingly admitted. The event, raising funds for an orphanage, offered a rare glimpse into the club's orbit, where the man with a silver-tipped cane, her quarry, might appear. She approached the annex, a less imposing building beside the main club, its entrance flanked by potted ferns. A footman scrutinized her letter, his gaze lingering on her dowdy attire. "Name?" he asked. "Miss Agnes Finch, companion to Viscountess Harrow," Miss Marple said, her voice quavering just enough to sell the ruse. The footman nodded, ushering her into a drawing-room aglow with chandeliers. Ladies in fur-trimmed gowns sipped tea, their chatter a low hum. Miss Marple scanned the room, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed spectacles. No silver-tipped cane, but the day was young. She took a seat near a window overlooking the club's courtyard, where men in tailcoats occasionally passed. Sipping her tea, she listened to the gossip swirling around her. The Diogenes Club, famed for its silence members were forbidden to speak except in designated rooms, was a haven for London's elite. Politicians, financiers, and aristocrats mingled here, their secrets guarded by tradition. Yet secrets, Miss Marple knew, had a way of leaking. A matron in emerald satin leaned toward her neighbor, whispering, "Sir Reginald Vance was here last night, dazzling as ever. Showed off a sapphire the size of a quail's egg." Miss Marple's cup paused mid-air. A sapphire? Her pulse quickened. The brooch, sold by Clarence to a pawnbroker, had passed to a gentleman with a silver-tipped cane. Could Sir Reginald be her man? She filed the name away, turning her attention to the courtyard. A figure caught her eye, a tall man, perhaps 40, with a hawkish profile and a cane glinting under the gaslight. He paused to light a cigar, revealing a flash of blue at his lapel. A gemstone, unmistakably STARBURST her breath caught. The brooch, or a cunning replica? She memorized his features. Dark hair swept back, a mustache waxed to points, eyes that scanned the courtyard with predatory alertness. He entered the main club, vanishing from view. Miss Marple set her cup down, her mind racing. Sir Reginald Vance, if he was indeed the man, was no petty thief. Displaying the brooch so brazenly suggested confidence or arrogance. The tea dragged on, with speeches about orphan welfare that Miss Marple barely heard. She excused herself, claiming a headache, and lingered in the annex's foyer, hoping to glimpse Sir Reginald again. Instead, she overheard two footmen by the cloakroom, their voices low. "Vance is at it again," one muttered. "Meeting some foreign chap tonight in the smoking-room. Talk of crates and ships. Smuggling, you reckon?" The other asked. "Keep your voice down, idiot. Walls have ears." Miss Marple's lips curved faintly. Smuggling. The brooch might be part of a larger scheme, its theft a cog in a criminal machine. She needed to hear that meeting, but the club's inner sanctum was a fortress. As she pondered, a woman brushed past her, dropping a silk handkerchief. Miss Marple bent to retrieve it, noting its monogram, R.V. Sir Reginald's, or a coincidence. The woman, a statuesque blonde in a burgundy gown, turned back. "Oh, thank you," she said, her accent faintly continental. Her eyes, cold and assessing, lingered on Miss Marple a moment too long before she swept away. Miss Marple tucked the encounter away, sensing a thread worth pulling. Outside, the fog had thickened, cloaking Pall Mall in a ghostly veil. Miss Marple returned to her Bloomsbury boarding-house, her mind a whirl of clues. Sir Reginald Vance, the sapphire, the smuggling talk, the blonde woman, each a piece of a puzzle. The note's warning echoed, the knave's not alone. Clarence was a pawn, Sir Reginald the player, but who else was on the board? At her desk she opened The Art of Ciphers, the book Clarence had left at Mordecai's pawnshop. The scrap of numbers, the 22nd of March 14, 7129, had yielded meet at, but further decoding stalled. She tried a new approach, cross-referencing the numbers with the newspaper she'd bought, suspecting a public cipher. No luck. Frustrated, she turned to her knitting, the needle's rhythm soothing her thoughts. A knock startled her. The landlady, Mrs. Dodd, peered in. "Letter for you, Miss Finch, hand-delivered, no sender." Miss Marple opened it, her fingers steady despite the chill it brought. A single line in the same hurried script as the manner's note. "Curiosity kills, old lady." Her lips tightened. Someone was watching, close enough to know her alias. Sir Reginald, the blonde, or another shadow? She burned the note in the fireplace, its ashes curling like secrets. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. Instead, she planned her next move, the smoking-room meeting. Women couldn't enter, but servants might. She recalled Mrs. Dodd mentioning a cousin who cleaned at the Diogenes Club. A favor, perhaps, could grant her ears inside. The next morning, Miss Marple visited Mrs. Dodd's kitchen, spinning a tale of needing a reference for a friend. Over tea, she steered the conversation to the cousin, Elsie, a maid at the club. Might Elsie need extra help? Miss Marple asked. "My friend's discreet, good with details. Double quotes," Mrs. Dodd beamed. "I'll ask. Elsie's always grumbling about the workload." By noon, Elsie agreed to smuggle Miss Marple into the club as a temporary cleaner, provided she kept her head down. That evening, dressed in a maid's drab uniform, Miss Marple entered the Diogenes Club through the service door. The air smelled of polish and cigar smoke. The corridors hushed but for the clink of glass. Elsie pointed her to the smoking-room, warning her to avoid the members' gaze. Miss Marple dusted a nearby hall, her cloth moving slowly as she strained to hear through the smoking-room's oak door. Sir Reginald's voice, smooth and commanding, carried faintly. "The crates sail tomorrow. The Black Gull, Dover. Our buyer in Paris is impatient." A second voice, accented and gruff, replied, "And the sapphire? It's too hot to move now." "Patience," Sir Reginald said. "It's my insurance." The knave's mistake was selling it cheap. Miss Marple's grip tightened on her cloth. Clarence, the knave, had botched the theft, selling the brooch to a pawnbroker who'd passed it to Sir Reginald. The Black Gull in Paris suggested a smuggling ring, the brooch a prize, or a bargaining chip. But a creak in the floorboard snapped her attention. A footman approached, his eyes narrowing. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "Dusting, sir. she mumbled, head bowed. He grunted, moving on, but her heart pounded. She slipped back to the service entrance, thanking Elsie with a sovereign dot at the boarding house. Miss Marple sat by her window, the fog a mirror to her thoughts. Sir Reginald was the mastermind, Clarence his unwitting tool. The Black Gull was her next lead, but Dover was hours away, and the ship might sail before she arrived. She needed allies. Her nephew Raymond knew a journalist with port contacts, but involving him risked exposure. No, she'd go alone, as always thought as she packed her valise. A glint caught her eye, a cufflink, half hidden under her chair. Gold engraved with a crest, a raven clutching a key. She hadn't noticed it before. Sir Reginald's, the blonde's, or planted by her unseen watcher. Its presence felt like a taunt, a move in a game she was only beginning to understand. Miss Marple tucked the cufflink into her pocket, her resolve steel. Sir Reginald thought her a meddling old woman, but he'd underestimated her. The Black Gull awaited, and with it answers. She'd outwit this knave, sapphire or no, and unravel his empire thread by thread. Chapter 4. A crust of secrets. The train to Cornwall wound through a landscape of jagged cliffs and rolling moors, its whistle piercing the salt-tinged air. Miss Jane Marple sat by the window, her gloved hands folded over the leather valise that held her knitting, the art of ciphers, and the gold cufflink engraved with a raven clutching a key. The crest, glimpsed in the fog of London, was her tether to Sir Reginald Vance, the suave aristocrat whose sapphire brooch and smuggling plot had drawn her from St. Mary Mead's quiet lanes to this wild edge of England. At 72 she felt the thrill of the chase, tempered by the weight of the anonymous threats that shadowed her steps. The cufflink's crest had sparked a memory of a heraldic guide she'd once browsed in her nephew Raymond's library. A raven with a key was rare, tied to the Vance family, whose ancestral seat, Vance Hall, lay in Cornwall's rugged hinterland. Sir Reginald's involvement in the brooch theft, confirmed by his brazen display at the Diogenes Club, suggested Vance Hall might hold clues to his wider scheme. The overheard mention of the Black Gull, a ship bound for Paris with contraband, pointed to Dover, but Miss Marple sensed the manner was a necessary detour. Secrets, she knew, often hid in the roots of a family's past. Disembarking at St. Ives, she hired a pony trap to carry her inland. The driver, a grizzled man named Iago, eyed her dowdy tweed coat with mild curiosity. "Vance Hall, you say? Ain't many visitors there. Place is half a ruin, and Sir Reginald don't take kindly to strangers." Miss Marple smiled, her tone disarming. "I'm a historian, Mr. Iago, researching Cornish estates. The Vance family's crest intrigues me." Iago grunted, flicking the reins. "Crest or no, mind your step. Locals say the hall's cursed. Been empty since the old baronet died, except when Sir Reginald slinks in." The trap rattled along a narrow lane, flanked by gnarled oaks and stone walls. Mist clung to the moors, lending an eerie hush broken only by the cry of a distant gull. Vance Hall loomed ahead, its granite facade weathered by centuries of storms. Towers flanked its central block, their windows dark, some boarded. Ivy choked the walls, as if nature sought to reclaim the estate. Miss Marple noted the neglect as sign of Sir Reginald's priorities lying elsewhere. Perhaps in his smuggling ventures, Iago dropped her at the rusted gates, promising to return at dusk. "Don't linger, miss. Place gives me the shivers. Posing. As a scholar, Miss Marple had telegraphed ahead, claiming an interest in the Vance archives. The housekeeper, Mrs. Trelawney, a wiry woman with a face like carved oak, greeted her at the door. "Sir Reginald's in London," she said, her Cornish accent thick. "But he said to let you see the library. Mind you don't touch nothing." The hall's interior was a study in faded grandeur. Dust motes danced in slants of light, piercing threadbare curtains. Portraits of Vance ancestors glowered from the walls, their eyes seeming to follow Miss Marple as she trailed Mrs. Trelawney. A faint creak echoed from above, but the housekeeper didn't flinch. "Old houses settle," she muttered. The library was a cavernous room, its shelves sagging under leather-bound tomes. A marble fireplace bore the raven and key crest, confirming Miss Marple's hunch. Mrs. Trelawney left her to browse, warning her to stay put. Alone, Miss Marple scanned the shelves, her fingers brushing spines on heraldry, maritime law, and alchemy. A volume on Cornish smuggling caught her eye, but a faint draught drew her to a bookcase by the window. One book, The Raven's Lore, protruded slightly. She tugged it, and with a soft click, the case swung inward, revealing a stone staircase spiraling. Down her pulse quickened, a hidden room too perfect to ignore. Lighting a candle from the mantel, she descended, her sensible shoes silent on the worn steps. The air grew damp, smelling of earth and mildew. At the bottom, a low chamber opened, its walls lined with crates and shelves. By candlelight she saw glinting treasures, silver candelabras, jade figurines, and a velvet pouch spilling pearls. In a locked glass case, a sapphire brooch gleamed, Lady Ashford's heirloom. Unmistakably, Miss Marple's breath caught. Sir Reginald wasn't just fencing the brooch. He was hoarding stolen goods, likely bound for the Black Gull. She examined a crate, its lid stenciled with Paris via Dover. Papers littered a table-forged bills of lading, lists of buyers with coded names. One document, a ledger, listed C. Morley as a seller, paid £10 for a blue star. Clarence, she realized, had been here, perhaps coerced into theft to settle a debt. A noise above snapped her focus. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate. Mrs. Trelawney, or worse? Miss Marple snuffed her candle, slipping behind a crate. The bookcase creaked open, and a man's voice, smooth as velvet, echoed down. "Check the vault, Trelawney." "I don't trust that historian, Sir Reginald." He was here, not in London. Miss Marple's heart pounded, but her mind stayed clear. The housekeeper's voice followed, grumbling. "She's in the library, sir. Nosy old bat." Torchlight flickered as they descended. Miss Marple pressed deeper into the shadows, her shawl catching on a splintered crate. Sir Reginald, impeccable, in a tailored coat, scanned the room, his silver-tipped cane tapping the floor. The raven crest glinted at his cuff-matching. Cufflinks she'd found in Bloomsbury. "If she's snooping, she regret it," he said, his tone cold. "The ship sails tomorrow. No loose ends." Mrs. Trelawney muttered assent, checking the glass case. "Brooch is safe, sir." "Good. Lock it and fetch the carriage. We're for Dover tonight." They retreated, the bookcase sealing behind them. Miss Marple exhaled, her mind racing. Sir Reginald's presence confirmed Vance Hall as his base, the vault his cache. The brooch was bait, leverage for his smuggling. Deal. but his mention of Dover and the Black Gull gave her a deadline tomorrow. She needed to alert authorities, but without proof, Sir Reginald would slip away. She emerged from hiding, relighting her candle. The ledger was too bulky to take, but she memorized key entries. Paris buyer, Le Renard, 5,000 guineas. A photograph slipped from the pages, a younger Sir Reginald with a blonde woman, her face familiar. The woman from the Diogenes Club, with the RV handkerchief. A partner? Or a rival? Footsteps returned, lighter this time. Miss Marple doused her candle, retreating to the stairs. A figure entered Mrs. Trelawney, alone, muttering about meddling spinsters. Miss Marple held her breath as the housekeeper checked the crates, then left. Seizing her chance, Miss Marple ascended, easing the bookcase shut. The library was empty, but dusk had fallen and Jago's trap awaited. She hurried to the gates, her valise heavier with the weight of her discoveries. Jago, true to his word, drove her to St. Ives, sensing her urgency. "Trouble at the Hall?" he asked. "Just an old house's secrets," she said, her smile masking her resolve. At the inn she wired her nephew Raymond, requesting discreet inquiries about the Black Gull. She couldn't reach Dover by morning, but a telegram to the port's harbour-master might delay the ship. She drafted it carefully. Suspect contraband on Black Gull. Inspect before departure. Anonymous dot as she retired to her room. The cufflink's crest gleamed in her mind. Sir Reginald was no mere knave. He was a kingpin, his empire built on stolen treasures. The blonde woman, Le Renard, and Clarence were pieces in his game, but Miss Marple was closing in. The vault's contents were her trump card if she could expose them. A creak outside her door jolted her. Slipping to the keyhole, she saw nothing but shadows. Another warning? Or her imagination? She locked the door, her knitting needles clicking. As she planned her next move, Dover beckoned, and with it a chance to snare Sir Reginald. The Raven's key was in her grasp. She need only turn it. Chapter 5. The smugglers' tide, the Cornish coast unfurled before Miss Jane Marple like a weathered tapestry, its cliffs jagged against a bruised sky. The train from St. Ives to Dover had been a grueling overnight journey, its swaying rhythm no match for the urgency pulsing through her. At 72 she might have craved the comfort of her St. Mary Mead cottage, but the chase for Lady Ashford's sapphire brooch and the unraveling of Sir Reginald Vance's smuggling empire kept her sharp. Her valise, now heavier with the weight of secrets, held the art of ciphers, the Raven and Key cufflink, and a mental map of clues. Sir Reginald's vault at Vance Hall, the ship the Black Gull, and the mysterious blonde woman tied to the initials. R.V. Dover's port was a chaos of salt and sweat, its docks alive with fishermen hauling nets, stevedores unloading crates, and gulls screeching over scraps. The air smelled of tar and brine, the horizon a gray smear where sea met sky. Miss Marple, dressed in a plain shawl and bonnet, to blend with the dockside crowd, stepped from the station, her eyes scanning for the Black Gull. Her telegram to the harbour-master, sent from St. Ives, had been a calculated risk too vague, and it would be ignored. Too specific, and Sir Reginald might be tipped off. She'd settle for suspect contraband on Black Gull. Inspect before departure. Anonymous. Her first task was to locate the ship. She approached a weathered stall selling hot chestnuts, manned by a ruddy-faced woman with a gap-toothed grin. "Good?" "Morning," Miss Marple said, her voice warm but purposeful. "I am meeting a friend off the Black Gull. Do you know where it's berthed?" The woman, wiping her hands on an apron, squinted. "Black Gull? She's at Pier 3, far end. Rough lot on that one, mind. Always loading at night, like they don't want eyes." Miss Marple thanked her, slipping a penny for a bag of chestnuts she didn't intend to eat. Pier 3 was a trek, the docks a maze of barrels and ropes. She moved carefully, her sensible shoes navigating slick cobbles. The threat from London curiosity kills. Old lady lingered in her mind, but fear was a distraction she couldn't afford. Sir Reginald was here, or soon would be, and with him the Brooch and Answers dot at Pier 3. The Black Gull loomed a sleek schooner, its black hull gleaming like wet obsidian. Men swarmed its deck, hauling crates under the watchful eye of a burly mate. Miss Marple lingered behind a stack of fish barrels, her bonnet shielding her face. She needed to board to confirm the brooch was among the cargo, but a direct approach was suicide. Sir Reginald's men would be alert, especially after her snooping at Vance Hall. A familiar figure caught her eye, Clarence, the footman from Ashford Manor, skulking near the gangplank. His dark hair was unkempt, his face pale, eyes darting like a cornered fox. So he hadn't stayed in London. Was he delivering more goods, or fleeing Sir Reginald's wrath? Miss Marple's lips tightened. Clarence was the key, but a slippery one. She needed a disguise. Near the pier, a fishmonger's cart stood abandoned, its owner haggling with a sailor. A stained apron and a wicker basket of cod lay within reach. Miss Marple hesitated. Stealing was hardly her habit, but necessity trumped propriety. She donned the apron, slung the basket over her arm, and approached the gangplank. Her posture stooped to mimic a weary vendor. "Fresh cod for the crew?" she called, her voice roughened to match the dockside vernacular. The mate, a bear of a man with a scar across his cheek, waved her aboard. "Make it quick, woman." The deck was a clutter of ropes and crates, the air thick with tobacco and rum. Miss Marple shuffled toward the hold, her eyes scanning for Clarence. She spotted him below, arguing with a wiry sailor over a wooden box. "It's all there," Clarence hissed. "Tell Vance I'm done." "Vance don't let go easy," the sailor sneered. "You run, you're dead." Miss Marple edged closer, pretending to offer fish to a deckhand. The hold's dimness concealed her as she peered into the box Clarence had opened. There, nestled in straw, was the sapphire brooch, its starburst design unmistakable. Beside it were other jewels, emeralds, rubies, a diamond tiara, all stolen, no doubt, from estates like Ashford Manor. Her heart raced. The Black Gull was a floating vault. Bound for Paris, and Sir Reginald's buyer lay Reynard. Before she could retreat, Clarence's gaze snapped to her. His eyes widened, recognition flickering. Had he seen her at the manor? She turned, feigning interest in a coil of rope, but his shout cut through the din. "Oi, you, fishwife! What are you staring at?" The mate spun, his scar twisting with suspicion. Miss Marple's mind raced. Exposure now would end her pursuit. She dropped the basket, letting fish spill across the deck, and stumbled toward the gangplank, muttering apologies. The mate lunged, but a deckhand slipped on the cod, crashing into him. Chaos erupted, shouts, curses, a scramble to catch the fish. Miss Marple reached the dock, her breath short, but her resolve intact. She shed the apron behind a crate, reverting to her bonneted self. Clarence's recognition was a problem, but the brooch's presence was a triumph. She needed to stop the ship, but her telegram hadn't sparked action yet. The harbor master's office was her next stop. The office, a squat building by Pier 1, reeked of ink and damp wood. The harbor master, Mr. Penrose, was a jovial man with a beard like a briar patch. Miss Marple, now the grieving aunt of a sailor, spun a tale of suspecting stolen goods on the Black Gull, her voice trembling for effect. "My nephew's mixed up with bad sorts, sir. I fear for him." Penrose, softening, checked his ledger. "Black Gull sails at dawn, bound for Calais. No inspection scheduled, but your telegram raised eyebrows. I'll send men tonight, quiet-like." Relief flooded her, but Clarence's face haunted her. He'd seen her, and if he warned Sir Reginald, her advantage was lost. She thanked Penrose, promising to return with more details tomorrow. Outside, dusk painted the docks in shadow. She needed to act fast. Recalling the chestnut vendor's gossip about nighttime loadings, Miss Marple lingered near Pier 3, hidden by a stack of nets. As stars pricked the sky, a carriage rolled up, its door bearing the Raven and Key crest. Sir Reginald stepped out, his silver-tipped cane glinting. With him was a blonde woman from the Diogenes Club, her burgundy cloak vivid against the dark. They boarded the Black Gull, vanishing into the captain's cabin. Miss Marple's mind whirred. Confronting them was folly, but Clarence was another matter. She spotted him slipping off the ship, a satchel slung over his shoulder. He headed for the dock's edge toward a cluster of fishermen mending nets by lamplight. Miss Marple followed, her steps silent. She'd tipped off the fisherman earlier, sharing a shilling and a vague tale of a thief on the run. Loyalty among dock folk was thin when coin was involved. As Clarence passed the fisherman, one, a burly man named Tom, grabbed his arm. "Going somewhere, lad?" Tom's mates closed in, their nets tangling Clarence's legs. He struggled, cursing, but they held firm, dragging him to a shed. Miss Marple approached, her voice calm. "Thank you, gentlemen. Hold him for the harbor master. He's tied to a theft at Ashford Manor." Tom nodded, pocketing another shilling. "We'll keep him tight till Penrose comes." Miss Marple retreated to her inn, her heart pounding with quiet triumph. The brooch was aboard the Black Gull. Clarence was caught, and Penrose's men would raid the ship. Yet Sir Reginald and the blonde remained free, their smuggling plot intact. The Raven crest, the coded ledger, the rendered all pointed to a web stretching beyond Dover Dot in her room. She examined the cufflink again, its raven mocking her. A noise at her window, a pebble against glass, made her freeze. She peered out, seeing only darkness, another warning or a trick of the wind. She locked the shutters, her knitting needles clicking as she planned. The Black Gull might be stopped, but Sir Reginald was a fox, not a knave. Paris loomed, and with it the next move in this deadly game. Chapter 6. The Knave's Confession. The Dover dawn broke in a smear of pink and gray, its light filtering through the salt-crusted windows of a dockside shed. Miss Jane Marple stood just inside the door, her tweed coat dusted with the night's chill, her eyes fixed on Clarence Morley, the footman whose flight from Ashford Manor had ignited her pursuit. At 72, she carried the quiet authority of a woman who saw more than she spoke, her presence steadying the cramped space where Clarence now sat, wrists bound by coarse rope. The fishermen who'd nabbed him at her behest lounged outside, their low voices mingling with the slap of waves against the pier. The shed, a makeshift jail until the harbor-master's men arrived, smelled of fish oil and damp wood. Clarence slouched on a crate, his dark hair falling over a face pale with fear. His eyes, once shifty at Ashford Manor, now darted between Miss Marple and the door, as if expecting Sir Reginald Vance to burst through. The sapphire brooch, glimpsed aboard the Black Gull, was safe for now. Harbour-master Penrose's raid was underway, spurred by her anonymous telegram, but Sir Reginald and his blonde accomplice had slipped away in the pre-dawn fog, leaving Clarence as her best chance to unravel their smuggling web. Miss Marple adjusted her bonnet, her voice gentle but firm. "Clarence, you're in a bind, but it's not too late to help yourself. Tell me about the brooch. Why did you steal it?" Clarence's jaw tightened, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I ain't saying nothing. You don't know who you're tangling with." She stepped closer, her tone unchanged. "I know enough. Sir Reginald Vance, the Black Gull, a buyer in Paris, called Les Renards. And you caught in the middle. The police will be here soon, Clarence. They'll be less patient than I." His head snapped up, eyes wide. "How'd you—" He caught himself, slumping. "You're that old lady from the manor. Saw you poking. About Lady Ashford's rooms." Miss Marple nodded, her lips curving faintly. "I noticed things, like the scuff mark by the staircase, the dirt smudge in the dressing-room. You were careless, Clarence, but I don't think you're the mastermind. Tell me your story, and I'll speak for you to the authorities." The shed fell silent, save for the creak of a gull landing on the roof. Clarence rubbed his bound wrists, his defiance crumbling. "I didn't want no part of it," he muttered. "It was Vance. He's got a hold on me." "Go on, miss," Marple prompted, settling onto a stool, her hands folded as if hearing village gossip. Clarence exhaled, his voice low. "I owed money gambling debts, bad ones. A bloke in London, works for Vance, said he'd clear 'em if I did a job. Get hired at Ashford Manor. Keep my eyes open. When Lady Ashford showed off that brooch, they told me to nick it. Said it was a test." "A test for what?" Miss Marple asked. "To prove I was loyal. Vance runs more than jewels, art, gold, even papers, stuff I don't understand. He's got men everywhere, from docks to drawing rooms. I took the brooch during the party, slipped upstairs when the dancing started. Left the key to make it look sloppy, like a stranger did it." Miss Marple's mind flashed to the Manor's library, the note tucked behind the raven's lore. The knave holds the key. "And the note in the library? You're doing?" Clarence frowned. "Note? I didn't leave no note. I took the brooch, handed it to a man at the station next day. He gave me £10 and told me to lay low in London. But Vance wasn't done. He sent word I had to go to Cornwall, then Dover, to move more goods. I was trapped." Her pulse quickened. If Clarence hadn't left the note, someone else at the manor had known his role. Mrs. Poole, the housekeeper, Grayson, the butler, or another guest? She filed the question away. Why flee to London, then return to the Black Gull? "I thought I could run," Clarence said, his voice bitter. "But Vance's men found me in a pub. Said if I didn't finish the job, they'd gut me." I was to deliver the brooch to Dover. Make sure it got on the ship. That's when I saw you, dressed as a fishwife. Knew you were trouble." Miss Marple's lips twitched. "Trouble for Sir Reginald, perhaps. Who's Lie Reynard?" Clarence shook his head. "Dunno, just a name Vance used. Some big buyer in Paris runs an auction for rich folk. Vance was set to meet him after the ship docked. Said the brooch was insurance for a bigger deal, and the blonde woman with Sir Reginald?" Miss Marple asked, recalling the burgundy-cloaked figure from the Diogenes Club and Dover's docks. Eyes flickered. "Her? She's bad news. Calls herself Miss Voss, but I heard Vance call her Clara once. She's in deep with him, handles his deals when he's playing the gentleman. Got a tongue like a whip and eyes that see through you." Miss Marple's mind whirred. Clara Voss linked to the R.V. handkerchief and the photograph in Vance Hall's vault, a partner, not a pawn. The raven and key cufflink found in her Bloomsbury room might belong to her, not Sir Reginald. "One last thing," she said. "The book you left at Mordecai's pawn shop, The Art of Ciphers. Why?" Clarence blinked, surprised. "That? It was Vance's. He gave it to me in London, said to study it for messages. I pawned it when I needed cash. Didn't make sense to me, bunch of numbers and codes." The shed door creaked open, revealing Harbour-Master Penrose, flanked by 2 constables. "Miss Marple," Penrose said, tipping his hat. "Your tip panned out. We found the brooch and a haul of stolen goods on the Black Gull. Ships impounded, but the owner slipped away." Miss Marple nodded, unsurprised. Sir Reginald's cunning outmatched Clarence's desperation. "This young man has been cooperative," she said. "He's a witness against Sir Reginald Vance. Treat him kindly." Penrose raised an eyebrow, but signaled the constables to take Clarence. As they led him out, Clarence shot her a look half gratitude, half fear. "You don't know Vance," he whispered. "He'll come for you." The shed emptied, leaving Miss Marple alone with her. Thoughts. Clarence's confession confirmed Sir Reginald's empire. Jewels, art, forged papers, all funneled through the Black Gull to Lie Reynard in Paris. Clara Voss was a new player, her role as vital as Vance's. The notes. Mystery deepened. Whoever placed it knew Clarence's guilt and wanted him exposed. A rival? Or a traitor in Vance's ranks? She stepped into the morning light, the docks quieter now as the raid's aftermath settled. Penrose approached, holding a velvet pouch. "The brooch, man, safe thanks to you. We'll return it to Lady Ashford." Miss Marple smiled, but her mind was elsewhere. The brooch was a victory, but Sir Reginald's escape was a challenge. Clarence's mention of a Paris auction offered a lead, but crossing the Channel meant leaving St. Mary Mead's safety behind. She wired her nephew Raymond, requesting discreet inquiries about Parisian auction houses. A reply awaited her. The inn. Lie Reynard linked to Gallery door. Paris. Masquerade ball tomorrow. Be cautious. A masquerade ball, a perfect stage for Sir Reginald to move his goods. Miss Marple booked passage to Calais, her valise packed with the cipher book and cufflink. As she boarded the ferry, the sea stretched before her, vast and unyielding. Clarence was caged, the brooch recovered, but the Raven's key remained elusive. Sir Reginald and Clara Voss were out there, plotting their next move. She'd turned a knave into an ally, but the true villains awaited, and Miss Marple was ready to meet them on their own ground. Chapter 7. The Parisian Masquerade. The gaslights of Paris cast a golden sheen over the cobbled streets, their flicker dancing in the Seine's dark mirror. Miss Jane Marple, cloaked in a rented velvet domino and a feathered mask, stepped from a fiacre onto the grand steps of the gallery door, a palatial auction house nestled in the heart of the Marais. At 72, she moved with the quiet grace of a woman accustomed to blending in, yet tonight's masquerade ball a-glittering. Cover for Sir Reginald Vance's illicit auction demanded boldness. Her valise, left at a discreet pension near the Louvre, held the art of ciphers and the raven and key cufflink, but her mind carried the weight of Clarence's confession, Sir Reginald, Clara Voss, and the mysterious Leigh Reynard were here trading stolen treasures under the guise of revelry. The gallery door's facade gleamed with marble and gilt, its doors flung wide to admit a stream of masked figures nobles, financiers, and shadowy dealers, their identities veiled by silk and sequins. Miss Marple's mask, a simple black columbina, concealed her sharp eyes as she presented her invitation, forged by a Montmartre printer Raymond had recommended. Clarence's intel, extracted in de Beauver's shed, had pinpointed this event, an auction of contraband with Lady Ashford's sapphire brooch as a prize. The note from Ashford Manor, "The Knave holds the key," still nagged her. Someone had known Clarence's role. Was that traitor here, hidden among the masks? Inside, the ballroom was a riot of opulence. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto a sea of dancers, their laughter mingling with a string quartet's waltz. Gilded mirrors reflected peacock feathers, jeweled turbans, and velvet capes. Miss Marple drifted to the edge, her domino's hood shadowing her face. She scanned for Sir Reginald's telltale silver-tipped cane or Clara Voss's blonde hair, recalling the burgundy-cloaked woman from Dover. The air smelled of champagne and intrigue, a heady mix that sharpened her senses. A liveried footman offered a program listing curiosities for private bidding in an upstairs salon. Lot 17 caught her eye. Starburst sapphire, provenance unknown. Her pulse quickened. The brooch, impounded on the Black Gull, shouldn't be here, unless Sir Reginald had swapped it with a replica during the raid. His cunning ran deeper than she'd feared. She needed access to the salon, but the staircase was guarded by a burly man in a harlequin mask, checking invitations against a list. Miss Marple's forged pass wouldn't pass muster. She lingered by a buffet laden with oysters and macarons, eavesdropping on a pair of masked women in sapphire blue gowns. Le Reynard's bold. "Showing his face tonight," one whispered, her fan fluttering. "Vance swears the sapphire's clean." "Clean?" The other scoffed. "After Dover, he's playing with fire." Miss Marple's lips tightened. The Reynard was here, and Sir Reginald was undeterred by the raid. She needed to disrupt the auction, but how? Her gaze fell on a footman carrying a tray of bidding paddles, wooden plaques with numbers for anonymity. An idea sparked. If she could swap a paddle with a fake, she might sow chaos, exposing the bidders. She trailed the footman to a side room where paddles were stacked on a table. Alone for a moment, she slipped a blank card from her reticule, scrawling a random number 42 in ink borrowed from a desk. As the footman returned, she feigned a stumble, knocking the tray. Paddles scattered, and she deftly swapped her fake for a real one, number 19. "Oh, my clumsiness!" She gasped, her voice quavering. The footman, flustered, helped her up, oblivious to the switch. Back in the ballroom, Miss Marple watched the paddles number 19 appear in the hands of a masked man with a silver-tipped cane. Sir Reginald unmistakable in a black domino, and tricorn hat, his mustache waxed to points. Beside him stood a woman in a crimson mask, her blonde hair coiled in an elaborate chignon. Clara Voss, their heads bent together, plotting as dancers swirled past. The auction began at midnight, announced by a gong. Masked bidders ascended to the salon, their paddles glinting. Miss Marple, lacking entry, lingered below, her heart pounding. She'd planted a seed of discord number 42, would confuse the auctioneer, perhaps forcing a pause. She positioned herself near the staircase, pretending to admire a tapestry of a raven, its key-shaped beak a chilling echo of the Vance crest. Minutes passed, then a shout erupted from the salon. "Number 42? Who's 42? The auctioneer's voice was shrill. "This paddle's not on my list." Sir Reginald's voice cut through sharp. "A mistake, surely. Proceed." But the damage was done. Bidders murmured, suspicion rippling. A man in a fox mask Lerenard stormed out, muttering in French about amateurs. Miss Marple seized her chance, slipping upstairs in the chaos. The salon was a plush chamber, its walls hung with velvet. A table displayed lots, paintings, vases, and the sapphire brooch, its starburst gleaming under a lamp. She edged closer, noting its clasp a tiny flaw not present in Lady Ashford's original. A fake, as she'd suspected. Before she could retreat, Sir Reginald appeared, his eyes narrowing through his mask. "You," he hissed, recognizing her. Despite the disguise, the meddling spinster from Dover. Miss Marple's heart raced, but her voice stayed calm. "A lovely evening, sir. I'm merely admiring the art." He grabbed her arm, his grip iron. "You've cost me enough. Who sent you?" Clara Voss materialized, her crimson mask glinting. "Reginald, not here. She's alone. Look at her. Dispose of her quietly." Miss Marple's free hand slipped into her reticule, clutching a letter opener she'd taken from the pension. She didn't intend to use it, but its weight steadied her. "Unhand me," she said, her tone icy, "or your guest will hear more than bids." Sir Reginald hesitated, then released her as footsteps approached. A footman announced the auction's resumption, forcing him to retreat. Clara's eyes bored into Miss Marple's, a silent promise of retribution. They swept back to the salon, leaving her trembling but triumphant. She hurried downstairs, her mind racing. The fake paddle had exposed Lerenard and confirmed the brooch's forgery, but she needed proof of the real one's fate. In the ballroom she spotted a discarded bidding ledger near the buffet, dropped in the chaos. She snatched it, tucking it into her domino. Its pages listed buyers' aliases and lots, including Starburst Sapphire, sold to Lee Renard, 5,000 guineas. A scuffle broke out near the staircase, two masked men grappling, one accusing the other of fraud. The ledger slipped from her grasp in the melee. Snatched by a fleeing bitter dot, Miss Marple cursed her carelessness, but the night wasn't lost. She disrupted Sir Reginald's auction, glimpsed Lerenard, and confirmed Clara Voss's role. The real brooch was likely still with Sir Reginald, a bargaining chip for his next move. As she slipped into the Paris night, the fiacre's wheels rattling, she planned her next step. The ledger's loss stung, but its contents were seared in her memory dot at the pension. She locked her door, her knitting needles clicking as she sifted clues. The raven crest, the cipher book, the threats each pointed to a web spun by Sir Reginald and Clara with Le Renard at its edge. The note from Ashford Manor haunted her. Who had called Clarence the knave? Someone here, perhaps, watching from the shadows. A creak outside her window made her pause. She peered through the shutters, seeing a figure in a fox mask vanish into an alley. Le Renard or a spy? Fear prickled, but she pushed it aside. Tomorrow she'd hunt for Clara Voss's trail, perhaps in Paris's art world, where aliases like Le Renard thrived. The masquerade was over, but the game was far from won. Miss Marple's quiet victory sowing chaos in Sir Reginald's plans lit her path forward, a beacon in Paris's glittering dark. Chapter 8. A Cipher in the Louvre. The Parisian morning unfurled in a haze of sunlight, gilding the Louvre's sprawling facade as Miss Jane Marple stepped from a fiacre onto the cobblestones of the Cour Carrée. At 72, her tweed coat and sensible bonnet marked her as a tourist, but her sharp eyes, hidden behind wire-rimmed spectacles, scanned the crowd with purpose. The chaos of last night's masquerade at the Galerie d'Or, where she'd disrupted Sir Reginald Vance's illicit auction and glimpsed the elusive Le Renard, had cost her the bidding ledger, but sharpened her resolve. Lady Ashford's sapphire brooch, revealed as a fake, was a pawn in a larger game, and Clara Voss, Sir Reginald's blonde accomplice, was her next lead. The raven and key cufflink, tucked in her valise with the art of ciphers, whispered of secrets. Yet, to unravel, the lost ledger nagged at her. Its pages, glimpsed briefly, listed buyers' aliases and contraband, including the fake brooch sold to Le Renard. Miss Marple suspected the real brooch remained with Sir Reginald, a bargaining chip for his smuggling empire. Clarence's confession in Dover had mentioned Clara Voss's ties to Paris's art world, and the Galerie d'Or's guest list, overheard in whispers, pointed to an art dealer named Monsieur Duval, a frequent Louvre visitor. If Clara or Renard operated here, the museum's labyrinthine halls might hold clues. The Louvre buzzed with tourists and scholars, its air heavy with the scent of polished wood and old canvas. Miss Marple purchased a guidebook, blending with a group admiring a marble Venus. Her plan was simple: pose as an amateur art enthusiast, inquire about Duval, and watch for signs of Sir Reginald's network. The cipher book, with its scrap of numbers 14322, 7129, had yielded meet at, but further decoding required a key text. She suspected the ledger's codes might align with Duval's dealings, perhaps hidden in plain sight among the museum's treasures dot at the information desk. She approached a clerk, a young man with ink-stained fingers. "Pardon, monsieur," she said, her French accented but clear. "I'm seeking Monsieur Duval, the art dealer. I was told he frequents the Louvre." The clerk frowned, adjusting his spectacles. "Duval? He's often in the Dutch wing, near the Rembrandts. But he's private, madam. Doesn't take kindly to strangers." As Marple thanked him, her smile disarming. The Dutch wing was a trek through crowded galleries, but she moved steadily, her guidebook open to deflect attention. The museums, grandeur vaulted ceilings, gilded frames, the murmur of a dozen languages felt like a stage, each visitor a potential player in Sir Reginald's game. She recalled the note from Ashford Manor, The knave holds the key. Someone had known Clarence's guilt. Was Duval that shadow or another pawn? In the Dutch wing she spotted a man matching the clerk's description. Slim, 50-ish, with a goatee and a velvet waistcoat, studying a Rembrandt portrait. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, flicked over the crowd. Miss Marple lingered by a Vermeer, pretending to sketch its details. Duval's posture tense, watchful, suggested a man expecting trouble. She needed to approach him, but directly risked exposure. A distraction presented itself. A group of schoolgirls, giggling over a painting's cherubs, blocked Duval's view. Miss Marple slipped closer, pausing by a small canvas of a raven perched on a quay, its frame bearing a faint crest. Her breath caught the Vance family's symbol, hidden in plain sight. The painting's plaque read Allegory of Secrets, Anonymous, 17th century. She examined it, noting odd markings along the frame, dots and dashes like Morse code, but irregular. A cipher? Before she could transcribe them, Duval's voice cut through. "Madam, you admire obscure works?" He stood beside her, his tone polite but probing. Miss Marple turned, her face a mask of innocence. "Oh, yes, monsieur. Such symbolism. Ravens and keys quite intriguing." Duval's eyes narrowed. A rare taste. Most prefer the Mona Lisa's smile to these enigmas. He gestured to the painting. "This one's on loan from a private collection. Its owner values discretion." Her pulse quickened. "Sir Reginald's collection? Or Clara's?" She ventured a risk. "I heard Monsieur Duval deals in such pieces. I'm Mrs. Finch, a collector of curiosities." Duval stiffened, his smile thin. "You're misinformed, madame. I'm merely an appraiser. Enjoy your visit." He turned away, but not before his hand brushed his pocket, revealing a glint of gold. A cufflink raven dash-shaped dot. Miss Marple's heart raced. Duval was linked to the Vance crest, perhaps a courier for Sir Reginald's goods. The paintings. Markings demanded closer study, but Duval's departure spurred her to action. She followed at a distance, her guidebook shielding her face. He moved swiftly, exiting the gallery toward a service corridor marked Personnel Sulement. She hesitated. Trespassing was bold, even for her, but the cipher's promise outweighed. Caution. The corridor was dim, lined with crates and cleaning supplies. Duval vanished around a corner, but voices echoed, his low and urgent, and another female, with a familiar edge. Clara Voss. Miss Marple pressed against a crate, her breath shallow. "The old woman's here," Duval hissed. "She was at the ball, meddling." "She's a nuisance, not a threat," Clara snapped. "Focus on the safe house. The Reynard spooked, and the real sapphires still with Reginald. Geneva, tomorrow." Miss Marple's mind whirred. Geneva a safe house, likely the next hub. For Sir Reginald's contraband. The real brooch was with him, as she'd suspected. But Clara's dismissal of her as a nuisance stung, fueling her resolve. She needed the painting's cipher, a potential key to their network. Footsteps approached two men, grumbling in French about late shipments. Miss Marple ducked behind a crate, but her shawl caught on a nail, tearing with a faint rip. The men paused, one shining a lantern her way. "Who's there?" He barked. She froze, heart pounding. The lantern's beam swept past, missing her by inches. The men moved on, muttering about rats. Miss Marple exhaled, untangling her shawl. She couldn't linger. Duval and Clara might return. Back in the gallery, she memorized the painting's markings. Dot, dash, dot, dash. Dot, 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 dash, and a sequence of numbers etched faintly. 3712. A hybrid cipher, perhaps blending Morse with a book code dot. As she left the Louvre, the crowd thickened, a guided tour clogging the exit. She used the chaos to slip out, but a hand grazed. Her arm, a man in a gray coat, face half hidden by a scarf, his eyes cold. "Careful, madame," he muttered, vanishing into the throng. A warning, like the notes in London and Dover. Sir Reginald's spies were closing in dot at her pension. Miss Marple locked her door, spreading the art of ciphers on the table. The painting's Morse UKTCSV made no sense alone, but the numbers, the 7th of March 12, suggested a book cipher. Using the cipher book, page 3, line 7, word 12 yielded safe. Page 3, line 7, word 12 in a French dictionary she'd bought gave maison. Safe maison, safe house. The Morse might be initials, or a code for Geneva's location. She wired Raymond, requesting Swiss contacts. Investigate Geneva art dealers. Possible safe house linked to Vance. Urgent. A knock startled her, the pension's maid, delivering a newspaper. Tucked inside was a scrap of paper. Leave Paris, or the raven strikes. Miss Marple burned it, her knitting needles clicking furiously. Fear was a shadow, but Geneva beckoned. Duval, Clara, and Le Renard were threads in Sir Reginald's web, and the painting's cipher was her blade to cut through. She booked a train to Switzerland, her quiet triumph decoding the Louvre's secret, lighting her path into the unknown. Chapter 9. The Geneva Safe House. The train to Geneva sliced through the alpine dawn, its wheels humming a steady anthem against the backdrop of snow-dusted peaks. Miss Jane Marple, seated in a quiet compartment, gazed at the mist curling over. Lake Lemon, her gloved hands resting on her valise. At 72, her body might protest the relentless travel, but her mind was a steel trap, honed by the chase for Lady Ashford's sapphire brooch and the unraveling of Sir Reginald Vance's smuggling empire, the raven and key cufflink, the art of ciphers, and the cipher from the Louvre's painting UKTCSV. The 7th of March 12 weighed heavier than her modest luggage. The decoded fragment, safe maison, pointed to a safe house in Geneva, a hub for Sir Reginald's contraband, where Clara Voss and the elusive Le Renard might converge. Paris had been a crucible. The masquerade ball's chaos, the lost ledger, and the Louvre's cryptic painting had confirmed Sir Reginald's reach and Clara's ruthlessness. The latest threat, leave Paris, or the raven strikes, burned in her memory, its ashes fueling her resolve. She'd wired her nephew Raymond for Swiss contacts, and his reply awaited her at Geneva's Cornavin station. Art dealer Henry Moreau, Rue du Rhin, rumored defense for foreign clients. Safe house likely nearby. Stay sharp, Geneva's. Streets sparkled with a crisp elegance, their cobbled lanes lined with watchmakers' shops and patisseries. Miss Marple, dressed in a gray shawl and bonnet to blend with the city's matrons, checked into a modest pension overlooking the Jet d'Eau. Her plan was audacious. Infiltrate the safe house, confirm the real brooch's presence, and expose Sir Reginald's network to Interpol. The Louvre's cipher suggested a location, but UKTCSV remained elusive, perhaps initials, perhaps a code for Moreau's address. Her first move was to scout Rue du Rhin, a boulevard of wealth where Moreau's gallery stood. Posing as a widow seeking a gift for her niece, she entered the gallery, a sleek space of polished wood and soft lighting. Paintings lined the walls, Monet's, Cézanne's, but her eyes sought subtler clues. A clerk, a young woman with a tight chignon, greeted her. "Madame, may I assist?" "I'm Mrs. Finch," Miss Marple said, her voice warm. "I seek something. Unique, perhaps a piece with symbolic motifs. Raven's keys, that sort." The clerk's smile faltered, until Miss Marple noted. "We have few such works, madame. Monsieur Moreau handles special commissions. He's out today, but I can arrange a meeting." Miss Marple thanked her, declining the offer but noting a raven-shaped paperweight on the desk, its base etched with SV, the Morse from the Louvre. She lingered, pretending to admire a Pissarro, and glimpsed a back room through a curtain. Crates were stacked inside, one stenciled Paris, Gowrie door. Her pulse quickened, Sir Reginald's lute funneled through Moreau. Outside she trailed. The clerk's movements, noting her lunch break at a café across the street. The café's chatter offered gossip. Moreau was a recluse, often absent at night. His gallery rumored to hide a vault. Miss Marple's mind whirred. A safe house might be beneath the gallery or nearby, accessible via a hidden passage. She needed to infiltrate, but a frontal approach was suicide. Recalling Clarence's fear of Sir Reginald's men, she opted for subterfuge. At a local market, she befriended a chatty laundress, Madame Bisset, whose cousin cleaned for Rue du Rein's elite. Over tea, Miss Marple spun a tale of needing work for a friend, offering a franc for an introduction. Madame Bisset, warmed by the coin, arranged for Miss Marple to join. Her cousin Elise, as a temporary cleaner, at Moreau's gallery that evening. "Mind you," Bisset warned, "Moreau's odd. Locks doors, keeps lights low." Dressed in a borrowed maid's frock, Miss Marple entered the gallery at dusk, her heart steady despite the risk. Elise, a wiry woman with a perpetual scowl, handed her a mop. "Stay in the front. Don't poke about. Monsieur is particular." The gallery was silent, its paintings ghostly under dim gaslight. Miss Marple mopped slowly, her eyes scanning for anomalies. A rug near the back room seemed askew, its edge curling over a floorboard. When Elise stepped out to fetch water, Miss Marple nudged the rug aside, revealing a trapdoor with a recessed handle. Her breath caught a passage to the safe house. She lifted the trapdoor, its hinges oiled and silent. A narrow staircase descended into darkness, the air cool and musty. Lighting a candle from her apron pocket, she descended, her steps cautious. The passage opened into a basement vault, its walls lined with shelves of contraband, gold ingots, ivory carvings, and a locked chest. She pried it open with a hairpin, revealing Lady Ashford's sapphire brooch, its starburst unmistakable, nestled among emeralds and pearls. Papers beside it listed shipments to Lee Reynard, confirming Geneva as a nexus. A photograph slipped from the papers, Sir Reginald and Clara Voss, arm in arm with a third figure, a man in a fox mask. Le Reynard, the initials SV on the raven paperweight. Clicked into place, perhaps Sir Vance or a code for the vault. Before she could pocket the photo, a creak echoed above. Voices harsh, mail filtered down. "Check the vault." Moreau said someone's been asking questions. Miss Marple snuffed her candle, slipping behind a crate. Two men entered, their lanterns casting jagged shadows. One, with a scar across his cheek, was the mate from the Black Gull. "If it's that old hag again," he growled, "Vance wants her gone." Her heart pounded, but her mind stayed clear. The trapdoor was her only exit, now blocked. She scanned the vault, spotting a grate in the wall, likely a sewer vent. It was narrow, but she was slight. As the men rummaged through the chest, cursing the brooch's presence, she pried the grate loose, its screws rusted. Squeezing through, she emerged in a dank tunnel, the air fetid but free. The tunnel led to a canal bank where she climbed out, soaked but alive. She mailed the photograph to Interpol via a postbox, addressing it to an inspector Raymond had named, with a note: "Vance's Vault, Moreau's Gallery, Geneva. Contraband confirmed." The brooch remained behind, but its location was proof enough. At the pension, she changed, her knitting needles clicking as she planned. Clara Voss's trail, last seen in Paris, likely led here. Moreau was a link, but Le Renard's identity gnawed at her. The fox-masked man in the photo was a shadow, his role unclear. A knock startled her, the pensions boy, with a telegram from Raymond. Moreau linked to Clara Voss. Seen at Theatre du Rhin. Tread carefully. Miss Marple's lips curved. The theatre a stage for Clara's next act. She booked a ticket for tomorrow's performance, her quiet triumph uncovering the vault tempered by the threat's echo. The raven strikes. Sir Reginald's men were close, but she was closer. To his secrets, Geneva's chill wrapped around her, but Miss Marple's resolve burned bright, ready to face the fox in his den. Chapter 10. The woman in the photograph. The train from Geneva to London roared through the night, its rhythm a counterpoint to the storm of thoughts in Miss Jane Marple's mind. Seated in a dimly lit compartment, she clutched her valise, its contents, the art of ciphers, the raven and key cufflink, and her notebook anchors in a sea of intrigue. At 72, her body ached from the relentless chase, but her eyes gleamed with the clarity of purpose. The sapphire brooch, glimpsed in Geneva's hidden vault, was safe for now, its location mailed to Interpol. Yet Sir Reginald Vance and his blonde accomplice, Clara Voss, remained at large, their smuggling empire stretching from St. Mary Mead to Paris and beyond. The photograph from the vault, Sir Reginald, Clara, and a fox-masked man burned in her memory, Clara's face tying her to the RV handkerchief and the Diogenes Club's shadows. London's familiar smog greeted her at Victoria Station, its acrid tang a stark contrast to Geneva's crisp air. Miss Marple, dressed in her usual tweed and bonnet, blended with the morning crowd, but her mind was on Clara Voss. Clarence's confession in Dover had named her a key player, and the Geneva photograph confirmed her intimacy with Sir Reginald. Raymond's telegram had traced her to the Theatre du Rhin, but a follow-up wire from him awaited at her Bloomsbury boarding house. Clara Voss spotted in London, performing at Drury Lane Theatre. Alias, Celeste Varden, dangerous. Watch your step. Drury Lane was a gamble Clara might recognize her from Paris, but Miss Marple thrived on such risks. The note from Ashford Manor, "The knave holds the key," still gnawed at her. Someone had known Clarence's guilt. Clara, with her sharp eyes, might be that shadow, or know who was. The cipher from the Louvre UKTCSV. The 7th of March 12 had yielded safe Mason, but SV could mean Sir Vance or Stella Voss. Clara's trail was the key to unraveling. It dotted the boarding-house. Mrs. Dodd, the landlady, handed her a letter, its seal unmarked. Miss Marple opened it, her heart skipping. The raven sees all. Leave London. Another threat in the same hurried script as Paris and Dover. She burned it in the fireplace, her knitting needles clicking as she planned. Clara's performance was, tonight, a melodrama called The Shadow's Veil. Miss Marple booked a balcony seat, intending to observe from the shadows. Drury Lane Theatre glowed with gaslight, its crimson curtains and gilded boxes a world apart from Dover's docks. Miss Marple, in a borrowed shawl and veiled hat to obscure her face, settled into her seat, her opera glasses trained on the stage. The play began, a tale of betrayal and secrets, and Clara Voss billed as Celeste Varden commanded the spotlight. Her blonde hair gleamed under a tiara, her voice a velvet blade. Miss Marple noted her poise, every gesture calculated, as if playing to an unseen audience. During the first act, Miss Marple scanned the crowd. No silver-tipped cane signaled Sir Reginald, but a man in a box opposite caught her eyes light. With a fox-like smirk, his cufflinks glinting. Le Renard? Or a decoy? Clara's performance held the audience, but her eyes flicked to the boxes until Miss Marple filed away. At intermission, she slipped to the foyer, hoping to overhear gossip. The foyer buzzed with chatter, champagne flutes clinking. Miss Marple lingered by a poster of Clara as Celeste, her ears tuned to a group of theatre-goers nearby. Celeste's. A mystery, a woman in emerald silk whispered. They say she's meeting a Scottish lord after the show at the Savoy. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. A Scottish Lord Sir Reginald in disguise or another ally. The Savoy was a lead, but confronting Clara required precision. She returned to her seat, her mind racing. Clara's second act was a monologue, her character confessing a crime. Miss Marple leaned forward, sensing a parallel to Clara's own duplicity. As the curtain fell, applause roared, but Clara's bow was brief, her exit swift. Miss Marple hurried. To the stage door, a narrow alley, reeking of damp and grease paint. Posing as a fan with a bouquet bought from a street vendor, she approached the doorman, a burly man with a scarred lip. "Please, for Mademoiselle Varden," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm her aunt, come from Kent." The doorman snorted, but took the flowers, vanishing inside. Miss Marple lingered, hidden by a stack of crates. Clara emerged, cloaked in black, her tiara gone, but her presence unmistakable. She hailed a hansom cab, and Miss Marple, heart pounding, followed in another, instructing the driver to keep distance. The cab led to the Savoy Hotel, its electric lights a beacon in the fog. Clara entered, and Miss Marple, shedding her veil, followed at a discreet pace, posing as a guest seeking the lounge. The lobby was a swirl of fur and diamonds, but Clara's black cloak stood out, slipping into a private dining room. Miss Marple loitered by a potted palm, catching snippets through the door. "You're late," a man's voice growled, Scottish, rough. "Vance is furious. The Geneva vault's compromised." "It's that old woman," Clara hissed. "She was in Paris. Now here. She's no aunt, she's a bloodhound." Miss Marple's breath caught. Clara knew her guise. The man, not Sir Reginald, then muttered about Edinburgh, a charity gala where Vance planned to fence more goods. Before she could hear more, a waiter approached, forcing her to retreat to the lounge. She ordered tea, her mind whirring. Edinburgh was the next stage, but Clara's awareness of her was a dagger at her back. Emboldened, Miss Marple decided to confront Clara. She penned a note, "Meet me in the lounge. 11 p.m. I know your game." A friend and bribed a bellboy to deliver it. At 11, she sat by a fireplace, her shawl draped to obscure her face. Clara entered, her eyes scanning, and sat opposite, her smile ablaze. "You're bold, old lady," Clara said, her voice low. "What do you want?" Miss Marple met her gaze, unflinching. "The truth, Miss Voss, about the brooch, Sir Reginald, and Le Renard." Clara laughed, a cold chime. "You're out of your depth. The brooch is gone, and Reginald's untouchable. As for Le Renard, he's a ghost even to me. Leave, or you'll vanish like the jewels you chase." Miss Marple leaned forward. "You slipped, Clara. You said gone, not sold. The real brooch is with Sir Reginald, isn't it? And Edinburgh's your next move." Clara's eyes widened, a flicker of panic. She stood, her cloak swirling. "You're clever, but clever. Gets you killed." She swept out, leaving a scent of jasmine and menace. Miss Marple exhaled, her triumph bittersweet. Clara's slip confirmed the brooch's status and Edinburgh's role, but the threat was real. She wired Raymond. "Clara Voss to Edinburgh, charity gala. Vance plans to fence goods. Send Interpol contact." At her boarding house she found her. Room disturbed, a drawer ajar, her notebook untouched but rifled. Clara's spies or Le Renards. Knitting by the fire, Miss Marple sifted clues. The ciphers S.V. Stella Voss, and the photograph's fox-masked man pointed to Edinburgh. Clara was a queen in Sir Reginald's game, but queens could fall. Miss Marple's quiet victory cracking, Clara's facade, lit her path north, where the Raven's key awaited its final turn. Chapter 11. The Edinburgh Conspiracy. The Edinburgh skyline bristled with spires, its castle looming over the city like a stone guardian against the slate-gray sky. Miss Jane Marple, bundled in a woolen shawl and her ever-present bonnet, stepped. From the train at Waverley Station, her valise a familiar weight at her side. At 72, the journey from London had left her joints stiff, but her mind crackled with purpose. The chase for Lady Ashford's sapphire brooch had led her from St. Mary Mead to Paris, Geneva, and now Scotland, each step peeling back layers of Sir Reginald Vance's smuggling empire. Clara Voss's confrontation at the Savoy her slip about. The brooch in Edinburgh had set this stage, and the raven and key cufflink, tucked in Miss Marple's valise with the art of ciphers, was a talisman of her resolve. Clara's words echoed. The brooch is gone, and Reginald's untouchable. Yet her mention of Edinburgh's charity gala, overheard in the Savoy's dining room, pointed to a new move in their game. The gala, hosted at the Assembly Rooms to benefit a widow's fund, was a magnet for Scotland's elite and a perfect cover for fencing stolen goods. Miss Marple's nephew Raymond had wired a lead. Gala organized by Lord Dunmere, rumored to know Vance. Interpol alerted, but no jurisdiction yet. Proceed with care. The note from Ashford Manor, "The knave holds the key," still gnawed at her. Clara's knowledge of Clarence's role suggested an insider's betrayal, and tonight's gala might reveal that traitor. The assembly rooms glowed with candlelight, their Georgian elegance a contrast to the city's rugged chill. Miss Marple, posing as a donor named Mrs. Agnes Finch, wore a borrowed gown of navy silk, its high collar masking her identity. her forged invitation, secured through Raymond's theatrical contacts, granted entry, but she knew Clara and Sir Reginald would be vigilant after London. The cipher from the Louvre UK TC SV 3712 had yielded safe Mason, but SV might mean Stella Voss or Scottish venture. Edinburgh was the crucible, and she meant to test it. Inside, the ballroom swirled with tartan sashes and diamond tiaras, the air thick with whiskey and perfume. A piper's drone underscored laughter, but Miss Marple's eyes scanned for Sir Reginald's silver-tipped cane or Clara's blonde chignon. She mingled, clutching a glass of sherry she didn't sip, her ears tuned to gossip. A matron in plaid whispered to her companion, "Lord Dunmere's showing off a new gem tonight, a sapphire, they say, from a private sale." Miss Marple's pulse quickened. The real brooch, not the fake from Paris? She drifted toward the central dais where Lord Dunmere, a ruddy-faced man with mutton chops, held court. A sapphire gleamed at his wife's throat, its starburst design unmistakable. Lady Ashford's heirloom displayed brazenly. Sir Reginald's handiwork or Clara's? She needed to confirm its authenticity without drawing attention. A side room marked Donations Display offered a chance. The gala's charity auction showcased gifts from patrons, a likely front for fencing. Miss Marple slipped inside, pretending to admire a silver urn. The room was quieter, guarded by a lone footman who eyed her briefly before returning to his post. On a velvet pedestal sat a collection of jewels, including a sapphire brooch identical to Lady Ashford's, but its clasp lacked the telltale flaw of the Paris fake, the real one, then, or another decoy. She needed a diversion. Spotting a candle flickering too close to a curtain, she nudged a chair, letting its leg catch the fabric. "Oh, dear," she gasped, loud enough to draw the footman. As he rushed to adjust the candle, she slipped a tiny glass bead bought at an Edinburgh market onto the pedestal, its blue sheen mimicking a sapphire. If bidders mistook it for the brooch, chaos might expose Sir Reginald's scheme. Returning to the ballroom, she spotted Clara Voss, resplendent in emerald satin, her mask discarded, but her eyes sharp. Sir Reginald stood beside her, his cane tapping, a rhythm as he spoke to Lord Dunmere. Their ease suggested confidence, but Clara's glance swept the room, lingering on Miss Marple. Recognition or suspicion? Miss Marple turned, feigning interest in a piper, her heart pounding. The auction began, announced by a gavel's crack. Bidders gathered, their faces a mix of greed and boredom. When the sapphire brooch was called Lot 12, Miss Marple's bead sparked confusion. "That's not the starburst," a bidder protested, holding up the glass trinket. Murmurs rippled, and Lord Dunmere flushed, his wife clutching the real brooch at her throat. Sir Reginald's voice cut through, smooth but edged. "A clerical error. The true piece is Lady Dunmere's." He gestured to her necklace, but the damage was done. Bidders argued, accusing fraud. Clara's eyes locked on Miss Marple, a silent accusation. Before she could approach, Lord Dunmere stormed to the dais, demanding order. In the chaos, Miss Marple slipped to the cloakroom, retrieving her shawl. A hand grabbed her wrist, Clara, her grip like iron. "You're the Widow Finch, aren't you?" she hissed. "Your tricks won't save you." Miss Marple met her gaze, her voice calm. "I'm merely a guest, Miss Voss, but your brooch is real, isn't it?" unlike the one in Paris. Clara's face paled, her grip loosening. "You're a fool to cross Reginald." She released Miss Marple, retreating as Lord Dunmere approached, his face thunderous. The gala dissolved into shouts, bidders demanding refunds. Sir Reginald, flanked by 2 men, escorted Lord Dunmere out, his cane a silent threat. Miss Marple hurried to the street, hailing a cab. Her bead had exposed the brooch's authenticity, foiling the auction, but Sir Reginald's escape stung. She wired Interpol from her hotel. Vance at Edinburgh Gala. Real sapphire with Lady Dunmere. Clara Voss involved. Detain Dunmere. Clara's flight was a loose thread she'd vanished in the melee, likely to warn Sir Reginald at her hotel. A letter awaited, its script familiar. The raven's wings are wide. Flee or fall. Miss Marple burned it, her knitting needles clicking. Furiously. Clara was in Edinburgh, but where? The photograph from Geneva Clara, Sir Reginald, and the fox-masked Le Renard suggested she'd follow him. Amsterdam was a smuggling hub, and Raymond's contacts hinted at Clara's ties there. Booking? A ferry to Holland. Miss Marple sifted clues. The ciphers S.V. Stella Voss fit Clara's alias, but Le Renard remained a ghost. Her quiet triumph unraveling the gala scheme lit her path, but Clara's venom and Sir Reginald's reach loomed. Edinburgh's chill clung to her, but Miss Marple's resolve burned brighter, ready to hunt the Queen in her new lair. Chapter 12. The Hunt for Clara Voss. The ferry from Harwich to Hook of Holland churned through the North Sea's slate-gray waves, its deck slick with spray. Miss Jane Marple stood at the rail, her shawl pulled tight against the biting wind, her bonnet shielding her face from curious eyes. At 72, the relentless pursuit from St. Mary Mead to Edinburgh might have daunted another, but her mind was a beacon, fixed on Clara Voss, the blonde queen of Sir Reginald Vance's smuggling empire. The sapphire brooch, confirmed. Real at Edinburgh's gala, was still with Sir Reginald, and Clara's flight from the chaos Miss Marple had sown was her trail to follow. The raven and key cufflink nestled in her valise with the art of ciphers, pulsed with secrets as did the Louvre's cipher UKTCSV. The 7th of March 12, its SV now certain to mean Stella Voss. Edinburgh's triumph disrupting the gala with a glass. Bead mistaken for the brooch had exposed Sir Reginald's scheme, but let him and Clara slip away. Interpol, alerted to Lord Dunyan's role, had detained him, but Clara's venomous warning at the assembly rooms echoed. "You're a fool to cross Reginald." The latest threat, the raven's wings are wide. Flee or fall, burned in her memory. Its familiar script a taunt from Sir Reginald's network. Raymond's contacts had traced Clara to Amsterdam, a smuggler's haven, where her alias, Celeste Vardan, was known in art circles. The photograph from Geneva Clara, Sir Reginald, and the fox-masked Le Renard was her map, and Amsterdam its next marker. The ferry docked at dawn, Amsterdam's canals glinting like veins of silver under a pale sky. Miss Marple, posing as Mrs. Agnes Finch, checked into a modest pension near the Jordan, its gabled facade overlooking a flower market. The city's charmed bicycles clattering over bridges, the scent of fresh stroopwafels masked its underbelly, where stolen goods flowed as freely as water. Her plan was precise. Locate Clara, confirm the brooch's fate, and deliver Sir Reginald's empire to Interpol. Raymond's wire awaited her. Clara Voss, alias Celeste Vardan, linked to De Zilver and Sloydel Gallery, Damrak. rumored to hide goods on a barge. Interpol informed, but no warrant yet. The De Silvern-Sloitel Gallery was a sleek storefront, its windows displaying old masters alongside modern bronzes. Miss Marple, in a grey coat to blend with tourists, entered feigning interest in a Vermeer reproduction. The gallery's air was cool, scented with varnish and wealth. A clerk, a lanky man with a waxed mustache, greeted her. "Mevrouw, may I assist?" "I'm Mrs. Finch," she said, her voice quavering. "I seek a gift, perhaps something symbolic, ravens or keys for my niece." The clerk's eyes flickered, a tell she noted. "Such motifs are rare, Mevrouw. Our curator, Mademoiselle Varden, handles special orders. She's absent today, but I can fetch her catalogue." Miss Marple nodded, her heart quickening. Clara was here or close. As the clerk vanished into a back room, she scanned the gallery, spotting a small painting of a canal barge, its prow carved with a raven. A brass plaque read "De Naktroff Private Collection." The night raven a code for Clara's barge? She memorized its details, noting a faint smudge on the frame, like canal mud. Outside, she trailed the clerk's lunch break to a cafe, where he gossiped with a waiter. "Celeste's on her barge again," the clerk muttered. "Always at night, like a ghost." The waiter shrugged, mentioning the Prinsengracht Canal. Miss Marple tipped the waiter for her tea, her mind racing. A barge on the Prinsengracht was Clara's hideout, likely holding the brooch and more of Sir Reginald's loot. She needed to infiltrate the barge, but a direct approach risked exposure. At the pension, she befriended the landlady, Mevrouw Klaas, a widow with a knack for gossip. Over coffee, Miss Marple spun a tale of tracing a lost family heirloom, offering a guilder for local knowledge. Mevrouw Klaas, eyes bright, mentioned a boatman, Jan, who ferried supplies to canal barges. "He knows every vessel, Mevrouw. Find him at the Bloemgracht dock." At dusk, Miss Marple approached Jan, a grizzled man mending nets by his skiff. Posing as a tourist seeking a canal tour, she slipped him 2 guilders to row her past the Prinsengracht's barges. "I'm fond of old boats," she said, her voice light. "Any with unusual names like ravens?" Jan grunted, casting off. "There's De Naktroff moored by the Westerkerk. Odd lot, that one. Always dark, but lights flicker late." The skiff glided through the canal's mirror-like water, gaslights casting golden ripples. De Naktroff loomed ahead, a low, black-hulled barge, its windows shuttered. A faint glow seeped through a crack, and a shadow moved inside. "Clara?" Miss Marple's heart pounded, but Jan's presence kept her silent. As they passed, a figure emerged on deck, a woman, blonde hair catching the light. Clara Voss in a dark cloak, clutching a SATCHEL. Miss Marple ducked, feigning a cough. Jan rode on, oblivious. Back at the dock, she thanked him, her mind whirring. Clara was selling goods tonight, likely the last of Sir Reginald's haul. She needed to act before Clara vanished, recalling Mevrouw Klaas's tales of canal watchmen. She tipped one, a boy named Peter, to alert the police if he saw De Naktroff move at midnight. Miss Marple returned to the Prinsengracht, hidden by a willow's drooping branches. De Naktroff was still moored, but a skiff approached, its occupant a man in a grey coat. "Le Renard?" Clara greeted him, passing the satchel. Miss Marple strained to hear, catching fragments. "Last shipment, Vance's orders. Amsterdam's. Too hot." Before she could move, Peter's whistle pierced the night-her signal to the police. Lanterns flared as officers swarmed the canal, shouting in Dutch. Clara froze, then bolted, shoving the man into the water. The satchel sank, but police divers retrieved it later, revealing jewels, including the sapphire brooch. Clara sprinted down the canal path, but Miss Marple, stepping from the shadows, raised her umbrella like a barrier. "Stop, Miss Voss," she said, her voice steel. "Interpol's here. You're done." Clara's eyes blazed, but the police closed in, cuffs snapping on her wrists. "You're a plague, old woman," she spat. "Reginald will bury you." Miss Marple met her gaze, unflinching. "He'll try, but I'm not so easily buried." As Clara was led away, the man from the skiff-sodden but unmasked proved not La Reynard, just a minor fence. The satchel's contents confirmed Sir Reginald's empire, but he remained free, likely in hiding. Miss Marple wired Interpol. Clara Voss arrested, brooch recovered, Amsterdam, Vance at large. La Reynard unknown. At her pension, a final threat awaited. The raven never forgets. She burned it, her knitting needles clicking. The photograph's fox-masked man haunted her. La Reynard was Sir Reginald's shadow, but Clara's capture was a blow to his empire. Miss Marple booked a train to London, her quiet triumph trapping Clara, tempered by the chase's final act. Sir Reginald. Chapter 13. The Knave's final play. The train from Amsterdam to London swayed through the dusk, its wheels clacking a relentless rhythm that mirrored Miss Jane Marple's racing thoughts. Seated in a quiet compartment, her gloved hands rested on her valise, now worn from months of travel. At 72, her body protested the chase, but her mind burned with clarity, honed by the unraveling of Sir Reginald Vance's smuggling empire. The raven and key cufflink, the art of ciphers, and her notebook brimming with clues from St. Mary Mead to Amsterdam were her trophies. Clara Voss's arrest on de Naktroff's barge, the sapphire brooch recovered, was a triumph, but Sir Reginald, the true knave, remained a shadow. The Louvre's Cipher UK, TCSV 3712, had pointed to Clara as Stella Voss, but La Reynard, the fox-masked man in Geneva's photograph, was still a ghost. The latest threat, the raven never forgets, had followed her from Amsterdam, its familiar script a taunt from Sir Reginald's dwindling network. Clara's venomous parting words, "Reginald will bury you," echoed, but Miss Marple's quiet resolve outshone fear. Interpol, bolstered by her evidence from Geneva and Amsterdam, had tightened their net, but Sir Reginald's cunning kept him one step ahead. Raymond's latest wire, received at the ferry port, was her beacon. Vance sighted in Kent, near Blackthorn Manor. Possible parley with buyer. Interpol on alert. Extreme caution. Blackthorn Manor, a remote estate near Dover, was an odd choice, isolated, crumbling, far from Sir Reginald's usual haunts. Miss Marple suspected a trap, but the note from Ashford Manor, "The knave holds the key," nagged her. Sir Reginald, not Clarence, was the true knave, and Blackthorn might hold the final key to his empire. She wired Interpol from London, requesting backup but urging discretion. Vance at Blackthorn Manor, Kent, likely armed. "I'll scout ahead." Her plan was reckless, but she thrived on outwitting foes who saw only a meddling spinster, Dover's familiar. Salt air greeted her at dusk, the cliffs ghostly under a waning moon. Blackthorn Manor lay 10 miles inland, a ruin shunned by locals for its grim history. Miss Marple hired a trap from a wary driver, spinning a tale of visiting a cousin. Blackthorns cursed. "Ma'am," he muttered, flicking the reins. "No. One goes there, lest they're mad." "Or determined," she replied, her smile faint but steely dot. The manor loomed like a broken crown, its towers jagged against the sky. Ivy choked its walls, windows boarded or shattered. The driver dropped her at the rusted gates, promising to wait a mile off. Miss Marple, in her tweed coat and bonnet, slipped through the undergrowth, her valise left hidden in a ditch. A telegram from Sir Reginald, slipped under her hotel door in London, had lured her here. Blackthorn, midnight. "Parley, or the brooch is lost forever. Come alone." Its arrogance was his hallmark, but she'd brought insurance interposed over contact. Inspector Lyle was en route, alerted by her wire. The manor's grounds were a tangle of brambles, the air heavy with damp earth. Miss Marple circled to a side entrance, its lock rusted but intact. A hairpin and patience opened it, revealing a hall of peeling wallpaper and warped floors. Gaslight flickered from a distant room, drawing her like a moth. She moved silently, her sensible shoes avoiding creaks, her eyes scanning for traps. The raven and key cufflink in her pocket felt like a talisman. The drawing-room was a cavern of shadows lit by a single lamp. Sir Reginald stood by a cracked mantel, his silver-tipped cane gleaming, his face a mask of cold amusement. The sapphire brooch glittered on a table, its starburst taunting her. "Miss Marple," he drawled, "you're as persistent as a hound. Welcome to my endgame." She met his gaze, her voice calm. "Your empire's crumbling, Sir Reginald. Clara's in custody, the brooch recovered. Why parley now?" He laughed, a low rasp. "To gloat, perhaps, or to offer a trade your silence for your life. You've cost me millions, but I'm not finished. Leonard waits in Paris, and my network will rise again." Miss Marple's mind raced. Leonard, still a shadow, was his lifeline. She needed to stall, to draw him out until Lyle arrived. "You underestimate Interpol," she said. "And me, the note at Ashford Manor, who left it." His eyes narrowed. "A disloyal pawn, dealt with. You think you're clever, but you're alone." He raised his cane, its tip concealing a blade. She'd seen such tricks in Geneva. Before he could move, a creak sounded from the hall. Sir Reginald spun, cursing, as two men, his guards, burst in, dragging a figure. Inspector Lyle, bound and gagged. Her heart sank, but her face stayed serene. "A trap, then," she said, "but you've miscalculated. Blackthorn's not as empty as you think." Sir Reginald smirked, advancing. "No one's coming, old woman. You're my last loose end." He lunged, cane flashing, but Miss Marple sidestepped, her umbrella hooking his ankle. He stumbled, roaring, as she darted to the table, snatching the brooch. The guards rushed her, but a crash echoed glass shattering in the hall. Interpol agents, led by Lyle's backup, stormed in, pistols drawn. "Drop the cane." "An agent?" barked. Sir Reginald froze, his face twisting with rage. Miss Marple, heart pounding, slipped the brooch into her pocket, her umbrella raised like a shield. The guards surrendered, and Lyle, freed, nodded to her. "You're mad, Miss Marple, but brilliant." Sir Reginald's eyes bored into hers, a silent vow of vengeance. "This isn't over," he hissed as agents cuffed him. "Leonard will finish what I started." Miss Marple met his gaze, unflinching. Perhaps, but not today. The Manor swarmed with agents cataloging evidence, ledgers, jewels, a coded letter to Leigh Reynard. Miss Marple handed over the brooch, her notebook, and the cufflink, detailing her findings. Lyle promised Sir Reginald's trial would dismantle his empire, but Leigh Reynard's identity gnawed at her. The photograph's fox-masked man was her final thread, but Paris was too far, and her body craved rest. At her Doverin. No threats awaited a first in months. She wired Raymond, Vance arrested, brooch secured, Blackthorn Manor, Leigh Reynard at large, returning home. Knitting by the fire, she sifted clues. The ciphers U.K.T. perhaps unknown contact hinted at Leigh Reynard, but Sir Reginald's empire was broken. Her quiet triumph, outwitting him at his own game, warmed her more than the flames. Blackthorn's chill lingered, but Miss Marple's resolve held firm. The Reynard might rise, but she'd be ready. For now St. Mary Mead called. Its peace a reward hard won. The Raven's key was hers, turned at last. As dusk fell, she walked home, the village quiet, save for a blackbird's song. Her cottage welcomed her, its hearth aglow. She settled by the fire, knitting a scarf, her mind replaying the chase's thrills, the Diogenes Club's whispers, Paris's masquerade, Geneva's vault, Clara's snarl on the barge. Each had been a stitch in a tapestry now complete. A newspaper lay on her table, its headline touting a new theft in London, a diamond tiara, vanished from a Mayfair mansion. Miss Marple's lips curved. Le Reynard's work, or a new knave? She set the paper aside, her needles clicking. St. Mary Mead's peace was her reward. The brooch returned, Sir Reginald and Clara caged. Interpol would hunt Leigh Reynard, and she'd watch from afar. Her quiet triumph a fire banked but never extinguished. The night closed around her cottage, the roses swaying in the breeze. Miss Marple knitted on, content in her victory. The raven's key turned, the fox's shadow a challenge for another day. For now she was home, and that was enough. Chapter 14. A quiet triumph in St. Mary Mead. The late summer sun bathed St. Mary Mead in a soft golden glow, its rays filtering through the roses climbing Miss Jane Marple's cottage walls. Inside she sat by her hearth, her knitting needles, clicking a steady rhythm, a cup of Earl Grey cooling on the table. At 72, her hands bore the faint tremors of age, but her eyes sparkled with the quiet satisfaction of a puzzle solved. The sapphire brooch, Lady Ashford's heirloom, rested in a velvet box beside her, ready for return to its rightful owner. Sir Reginald Vance and Clara Voss were in custody, their smuggling empire shattered by her relentless pursuit from St. Mary Mead to Amsterdam. The raven and key cufflink, now with Interpol, was a relic of her triumph, though the shadow of Leigh Reynard, the fox-masked man, lingered like an unfinished stitch. The chase had been a whirlwind Ashford Manor's theft. London's fog, Paris's masquerade, Geneva's vault, Edinburgh's gala, Amsterdam's canals, and Blackthorn's trap. Each step had tested her. From cryptic notes, the knave holds the key to threats, the raven never forgets. Sir Reginald's arrest at Blackthorn Manor, orchestrated by her daring parley and Interpol's timely raid, had closed the circle. Clara's capture on de Nactroff had secured the brooch, and the ledgers from Geneva and Blackthorn had exposed a network spanning continents. Yet Leigh Reynard's identity, hinted at in the Geneva photograph, remained a loose thread, a mystery for another day. Miss Marple's cottage was a haven, its chintz curtains and polished oak, a stark contrast to the dark alleys and grand ballrooms of her journey. The village buzzed with her return, whispers of her exploits rippling through the post office and tea shop. Mrs. Clara Bantry, her friend and chief gossip, had insisted on a celebratory tea at Ashford Manor, and Miss Marple, though loath to bask in praise, agreed. The Brooch's return deserved ceremony. At noon she walked to the manor, the gravel drive crunching under her sensible shoes. The peacock from her first visit strutted across the lawn, its cry a faint echo of the chase's dangers. Lady Eleanor Ashford greeted her at the door, her face radiant with relief. "Miss Marple, you're a marvel. The village calls you a hero, and I quite agree." Miss Marple smiled, demurring. "I only followed the threads, Lady Ashford. The brooch belongs. Here." She handed over the velvet box, the sapphire catching the light like a captured star. The drawing-room was filled with familiar faces: Mrs. Bantry, Sir Geoffrey Tate, the vicar and his wife, even the dour butler, Mr. Grayson, Mrs. Poole, the housekeeper, served tea. Her once wary gaze softened. Miss Marple noted their ease, a contrast to the manor's tension months ago. The scuff marked by the staircase, the misplaced book on poisons, Clarence's flight, all had been clues to a larger web, now unraveled. Mrs. Bantry, her hat askew, leaned forward. "Jane, you must tell us everything. London, Paris, Amsterdam, how could you manage?" Miss Marple sipped her tea, her voice measured. "Observation, Clara. People reveal themselves in small ways: a glance, a slip, a misplaced cufflink. Sir Reginald was clever, but arrogance was his flaw. Clara Voss, too, underestimated a spinster's eye." Lady Ashford clasped her hands. "And that dreadful footman, Clarence?" "A pawn," Miss Marple said. "Coerced by debts, manipulated by Sir Reginald. He's turned witness, safe in custody. The true knave was Vance, but another remains Leonard, a buyer who slipped away." The room hushed, the weight of an unresolved shadow settling. Sir Geoffrey cleared his throat. "You've done enough, Miss Marple. Let Interpol chase this fox." She nodded, but her mind lingered on the Geneva photograph, the fox mask hiding a face she'd never seen. The cipher UKTCSV had named Clara as Stella Voss, but UK and TC were enigmas, perhaps Leonard's initials or a final code. She let the thought rest, savoring the room's warmth. Tea stretched into anecdotes, the villagers marveling at her courage. Miss Marple deflected praise, her thoughts drifting to human nature's complexities: greed, loyalty, betrayal. Sir Reginald's empire had thrived on these, but so had her victory. The note from Ashford Manor, "The knave holds the key," was a mystery solved. Someone, perhaps Mrs. Poole or a guest, had known Clarence's guilt and pointed her path. She'd never know who, but it no longer mattered. Chapter 15. The Secret of the Waxen Mark. The autumn wind swept through St. Mary Mead, rattling the shutters of Miss Jane Marple's cottage and scattering leaves across her rose garden. Inside she sat by the hearth, her knitting needles crafting. A shawl and soft heather wool, their rhythmic click a counterpoint to the village's quiet hum. At 72, her hands bore the faint stiffness of age, but her eyes, sharp as ever, missed nothing, neither the flicker of a curtain across the lane nor the whisper of secrets in a place that seemed, to the untrained eye, utterly serene. The sapphire brooch affair with its chase across continents, and the downfall of Sir Reginald Vance, was 6 months past, its triumph a quiet ember in her memory. Yet St. Mary Mead, for all its pastoral charm, was a crucible of human nature, and a new puzzle was brewing, one that tugged at her curiosity like a snagged thread. The trouble began with the village fete, an annual affair of Jan Stall's Morris, dancing and gossip set for the coming Saturday. The Fete Committee 7 of St. Mary Mead's most reliable souls had vanished, not as a group, but one by one over the past week. Mrs. Lavender, the soprano with a knack for scones; Mr. Higgs, the grocer with a booming laugh; Miss Beatrice Finch, the sharp-tongued librarian; Dr. Haydock, the village physician; Mrs. Price, the butcher's wife; young Tom Price, her son; and Miss Clara Bantry, ever the enthusiast, had all failed to appear at yesterday's planning meeting. The village buzzed with concern, but no one could pinpoint their absence. Illness? Elopement? Or something darker? Miss Marple, sipping tea at the vicarage with Mr. Clement, heard the tale with growing intrigue. "It's a calamity, Miss Marple," the vicar said, his hands wringing. "The fate's in disarray. Mrs. Lavender was to judge the preserves, Higgs the vegetables. They were fine at last week's meeting, but now nothing. Not a word." Her needles paused, her voice gentle but probing. All 7 gone without notice? Where was their last meeting? Clement frowned, adjusting his spectacles. The church. Hall Thursday passed. They were discussing the fate's centerpiece, a relic, the chalice of St. Bartholomew, to be displayed for the first time in decades. It's kept in the crypt, locked away. They seemed excited but secretive. Mrs. Bantry mentioned a special task afterward, but wouldn't say more. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. A relic, long hidden, and a committee vanished. This chalice valuable, I presume? Priceless, in a way, Clement replied. Silver, studded with garnets, said to date to the 12th century. Legend claims its curse brings ruin to those who misuse it. I thought it nonsense, but they were oddly fervent. She thanked him, her mind already threading clues. A relic, a secret task. 7 absences too deliberate for chance. She recalled a village tale. The chalice, tied to a medieval sect, was rumored to hide a map to a lost treasure. Had the committee stumbled onto something dangerous? At the village shop, Miss Marple probed Miss Finch's assistant, young Elsie, who was minding the counter. "Miss Beatrice hasn't been home," Elsie whispered, sorting pennies. "Left a note saying she'd visit a cousin, but her cat's unfed and she never leaves it. Found this in her desk, though." Elsie slid a wax seal across the counter, its surface stamped with a crescent moon pierced by a quill dot. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. The seal, brittle and red, was no ordinary. "Mark, may I keep it, Elsie?" "I'll return it." Elsie nodded, eyes wide. "Be careful, miss. There's a stranger about Mr. Gideon Wren. Calls himself a historian. Rented the old priory cottage. Seen with Miss Beatrice last week, near the church. A stranger, a seal, a relic." Miss Marple tucked the seal into her reticule, her mind on the priory cottage, a crumbling stone house by the river. She walked there at dusk, her shawl blending with the lengthening shadows. The cottage's windows were dark, but a faint glow flickered behind shutters. She knocked, her pretext ready, a lost tourist seeking directions. No answer but a rustle. came from the garden. Creeping around, she spotted a figure tall, cloaked, with a glint of silver at his wrist slipping into the trees. Gideon Wren? She peered through a shutter's gap, glimpsing a table strewn with papers, a candle illuminating a map of St. Mary Mead's church. A wax seal, identical to Elsie's, lay beside it. Her heart raced a conspiracy tied to the chalice. Before she could retreat, a dog barked and footsteps crunched. She ducked behind a hedge, her breath shallow as the cloaked figure returned, muttering, "No more meddlers." Miss Marple slipped away, her mind whirring. The committee's absence, the crescent quill seal, Wren's presence, threads of a larger design. At her cottage she examined the seal under a lamp, noting its wax was fresh, not old. A modern mark, then perhaps a signal. She recalled a history book in her nephew Raymond's library, mentioning a medieval order, the Knights, of the crescent quill, who guarded relics and hid secrets in wax. Was Wren reviving their rites using the committee? The next morning she visited Mrs. Bantry's home, finding her friend miraculously returned, though pale and evasive. "Clara, where were you?" Miss Marple asked, pouring tea. Mrs. Bantry fidgeted, her hand askew. "Oh, Jane, a silly whim. I went to London for shopping. Forgot to tell anyone." Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her tone was firm. "And the others, Mrs. Lavender, Higgs, the Prices? All gone, all back now, I hear." Clara flushed. "Back, yes, we had a meeting, private-like, about the chalice. Nothing to fret over. And this?" Miss Marple produced the wax seal. Clara's cup rattled in its saucer. "Where'd you get that?" Clara whispered. "It's a trinket, nothing more." Miss Marple leaned forward. "Clara, you're frightened. Tell me about Gideon." "Wren and the chalice." Clara's eyes darted to the window. "He's a scholar, Jane. Found us through the church records. Said the chalice holds a map to a treasure hidden since the Crusades. We swore to help him, to keep it secret. He gave us those seals as a bond." "And the vanishing?" Miss Marple pressed. "We were summoned," Clara admitted, "to the Priory cottage for a ritual. Wren said it'd unlock the chalice's secret. But something felt wrong. We left, promised to stay silent. He's dangerous, Jane." Miss Marple's mind raced. A ritual, a treasure, a stranger with power over the committee. She thanked Clara, urging her to stay safe, and headed to the church. The crypt, where the chalice was kept, was her next move. Mr. Clement, flustered but trusting, let her in, the air cold and musty. The chalice gleamed on a stone plinth, its garnets blood-red. She examined it, finding a faint engraving inside a crescent moon pierced by a quill and numbers, the 4th of September 11, a cipher, like the sapphire case. Her heart quickened. Using the art of ciphers from her valise, she tested the numbers against a Bible in the vestry. Page 9, line 4, word 11 yielded hidden. A second test, using a history of St. Bartholomew's, gave vault. A hidden vault? Beneath the church? She searched, finding a loose flagstone near the altar. Lifting it revealed a trapdoor, its lock rusted but intact. A hairpin opened it, disclosing a stone-chambered dot inside. Crates held relics, candlesticks, manuscripts, a gold cross, but no treasure. Papers listed names, Lavender, Higgs, Finch, each with sums paid. Wren was bribing the committee, But for what? A noise above snapped her focused footsteps, heavy, deliberate. She doused her candle, slipping behind a crate. Gideon Wren descended, his silver ring glinting, a pistol in hand. "I know you're here, meddler," he growled. "You've seen too much." Miss Marple's breath caught, but her voice was calm. "Mr. Wren, you're no scholar. The chalice is a lure, isn't it? You're after something bigger." He laughed, a cold rasp. "Clever for an old bat. The chalice points to a crusader's hoard, buried in these hills. The committee was my key local fools, eager for glory, but you forced my hand." He raised the pistol, but a shout echoed Mr. Higgs, with Dr. Haydock and Tom Price bursting through the trapdoor. "Drop it, Wren," Higgs bellowed, brandishing a poker. Wren hesitated, then bolted up the stairs, only to meet Constable Pauk. Alerted by Clara's frantic call, Miss Marple emerged, her shawl askew but her dignity intact. "Well done, Mr. Higgs. You've redeemed the committee." Wren was cuffed, his papers seized, revealing a fraud, no treasure, just a scheme to fleece investors using the chalice's legend. The committee, shamed but safe, confessed their greed, lured by Wren's promises. The wax seals were his mark, binding them to silence. Interpol, tipped by Miss Marple's wire, took Wren, linking him to a network of relic frauds dotted her cottage. Miss Marple knitted, the fate restored, the chalice returned to its crypt. The village hailed her, but she demurred, her triumph quiet. A new letter arrived, sealed with a crescent quill. "You've won this round, but secrets endure." She burned it, her needles clicking. St. Mary Mead's peace was hers, but the world's shadows waited, and Miss Marple was ready. Chapter 16. The shadow of the crescent quill, the October mist, clung to St. Mary Mead like a gossamer veil, softening the outlines of its thatched cottages and ancient yews. Miss Jane Marple sat by her cottage hearth, her knitting needles weaving. A blanket and muted greens, their steady click a counterpoint to the village's autumn hush. At 72, her frame was slight, but her mind was a beacon, piercing the fog of human deceit. The sapphire brooch affair and the chalice mystery, resolved weeks ago with Gideon Wren's arrest, were triumphs tucked into her memory like pressed flowers. Yet the crescent quill seal, found in Wren's papers, and echoed in a threatening letter, "You've won this round." But secrets endure had stirred her curiosity anew. St. Mary Mead's peace was fragile, and a new puzzle was unfolding. Its threads as elusive as the mist outside. The trouble began with a series of thefts, subtle but unsettling. Mrs. Lavender's silver locket, engraved with her initials, vanished from her bedside table. Mr. Higgs, the grocer, lost a rare coin collection, kept in a locked drawer. Miss Beatrice Finch, the librarian, reported a first-edition Dickens stolen from her desk. Each theft was marked by a wax seal red, stamped with a crescent moon, pierced by a quill left in place of the stolen item. The village whispered of curses, but Miss Marple saw intent. A thief with a flair for drama, taunting her with the same mark that had defined Wren's scheme. She sipped tea at the vicarage with Mr. Clement, whose nervous hands fidgeted with a hymn book. "It's uncanny, Miss Marple," he said, his voice strained. 3 thefts in a week, all with that wretched seal. The parish is on edge, and the constable's useless, says it's pranksters. Miss Marple's needles paused, her eyes sharp. "Pranksters don't leave wax seals, Mr. Clement. These thefts are deliberate. A message. Where were the seals found? Mrs. Lavender's on her pillow. Higgs's in his drawer. Miss Finch's on her blotter. No forced entry, no witnesses. It's as if the thief knows their homes, her mind whirred. The seals, identical to Wren's, suggested a connection, but his arrest ruled him out. A copycat? Or an accomplice? She recalled the chalice cases. Legend. The Knights of the Crescent Quill, a medieval order, used wax seals to mark their secrets. Was someone reviving their legacy or exploiting it? Any strangers in the village? She asked. Clement nodded. A Miss Evelyn Harrow arrived last week. Calls herself an antiquarian researching local folklore. Rented the old Grantham Manor. Up the hill. Odd woman keeps to herself, but I saw her with Miss Finch at the library poring over old maps. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. Grantham Manor, a derelict pile abandoned since the war, was an unlikely choice for a scholar. She thanked Clement, promising to look into it, and headed to the village shop. Miss Finch, sorting books behind the counter, was unusually subdued. "Beatrice," Miss Marple said gently, "tell me about Miss Harrow." Miss Finch's lips pursed. "She's nosy, Jane. Wanted maps of the old manor lands, said they're tied to a lost relic. Gave me this as thanks." She slid a wax seal across the counter, crescent quill stamped. Its edges fresh dot, Miss Marple tucked it into her reticule, her heart racing. Did she mention the chalice or Gideon Wren? No, but she asked about the church crypt. Odd-like? I told her nothing, but she's been seen with Tom Price, poking about the manor ruins. Tom Price again, the young butcher's son caught in Wren's scheme. Miss Marple visited his shop, finding him chopping lamb, his face drawn. "Tom," she said, her voice soft, "you're troubled. What's Miss Harrow to you?" He flinched, his knife pausing. "She's persuasive, miss. Said she's after a treasure, like Wren, but bigger. Wanted my help, since I know the manor's woods from hunting. I said no, but she left this." He produced a wax seal, matching. The others. Miss Marple's mind spun. Evelyn Harrow, the seals, the thefts, threads of a new conspiracy. Grantham Manor was her next move. At dusk she walked its overgrown path, the manor's turrets looming like broken teeth. Its windows were dark, but a faint glow flickered in a tower. She crept closer, her shawl blending with the mist, and peered through a cracked pane. Inside, a woman tall, dark-haired, with a scholar's stoop sorted papers by candlelight. A crescent quill seal glinting on her desk. Evelyn Harrow. A shadow moved behind her, a man, his face obscured, slipping out a side door. Miss Marple followed, her steps silent on damp grass, but a twig snapped, and the man vanished into the woods. Harrow's voice called from the window. "Who's there?" Miss Marple froze, then retreated, her heart pounding. She'd been seen, but not caught. Back at her cottage, she examined the seals under a lamp. Their wax was identical, their stamps. Precise as signature, not a relic. She recalled a history lecture Raymond had mentioned. The crescent quill order hid messages in wax, using micro-etchings visible only under magnification. Borrowing Dr. Haydock's microscope, she studied the seals, finding tiny numbers etched in the quill, 7-2-9, a cipher like the chalice case. Using a village almanac, page 7, line 2, word 9, gave cellar. Grantham Manor's cellar? She needed allies. Mrs. Bantry, chastened by the chalice affair, agreed to join her. posing as a fate organizer visiting Harrow. At the manor, Evelyn greeted them, her smile thin. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple." A surprise. "I'm studying manor legends, nothing for the fate, I'm afraid." Miss Marple's eyes flicked to a map on the wall, marked with crosses near the manor's cellar. "Fascinating," she said. "Any relics like our chalice?" Harrow's gaze sharpened. "Relics are myths, Miss Marple. I deal in facts." Mrs. Bantry, oblivious, chattered about jam stalls, giving Miss Marple a moment to slip to the cellar door, unlocked in Harrow's haste. She descended, finding a damp chamber lit by a lantern. Crates held stolen goods, Mrs. Lavender's locket, Higgs's coins, Miss Finch's Dickens. A leather case revealed a silver crescent pendant, etched with a quill. Papers listed buyers coded as Moonlight Syndicate. Harrow was no scholar, she was a fence, using the seals to mark her thefts. Footsteps echoed. Miss Marple hid behind a crate as Harrow entered, pistol in hand. "You're meddlesome, old lady," she hissed. "Wren was a fool, but I'm not." Miss Marple's voice was calm. "You're stealing for the syndicate, Evelyn. The seals give you away. Surrender and I'll speak for you." Harrow laughed, raising the gun, but Mrs. Bantry's shout, "Jane, duck," startled her. Miss Marple hurled the pendant, striking Harrow's wrist. The pistol fell, and Mrs. Bantry, wielding a candlestick, knocked Harrow down. Constable Polk, alerted by Miss Marple's earlier wire, burst in, cuffing Harrow. The stolen goods were returned, the syndicate's papers sent to Interpol. At her cottage, Miss Marple knitted, the village fete a success. A new letter arrived, crescent quill sealed. The moon rises again. She burned it, her needles clicking. The syndicate lingered, but St. Mary Mead was safe for now. Her quiet triumph, outwitting another knave, warmed her hearth, ready for the next shadow to fall. Chapter 17. The ember of the cursed quill. The November frost dusted St. Mary Mead's hedgerows, turning the village into a crystalline tableau under a pewter sky. Miss Jane Marple sat by her cottage window, her knitting needles shaping a pair of mittens in soft charcoal wool, their steady click a metronome to her thoughts. At 72, her hands bore the faint tremble of age, but her eyes, keen as a hawk's, missed nothing, not the curl of smoke from a distant chimney, nor the flicker of secrets in a village that wore its tranquillity like a mask. The sapphire brooch affair, the chalice mystery, and the Moonlight Syndicate's waxen thefts were victories tucked into her memory, each a testament to her quiet tenacity. Yet the crescent quill seal, its final taunt, "The moon rises again," had arrived days ago, a red wax spectre that stirred her instincts. St. Mary Mead's peace was a fragile veneer, and a new enigma was smoldering, ready to ignite. The trouble began with fire, or rather fires. 3 in a week, each small but precise, had struck the village's edges. The old barn behind Mr. Higgs's grocer's shop was reduced to ash, its hay bales untouched, but a single crate of ledgers burned to cinders. Mrs. Lavender's garden shed, home to her prized rose cuttings, went up in flames, leaving only a blackened tin box. Miss Beatrice Finch's library annex, a shed for rare books, was scorched, a single manuscript case reduced to char. Each site bore a chilling signature, a red wax seal stamped with a crescent moon pierced by a quill, melted into the compte. Ashes. The village whispered of arson, of curses. But Miss Marple saw a pattern, a deliberate hand, taunting her with the same mark that had defined Evelyn Harrow's crimes. She sipped tea at Mrs. Clara Bantry's, whose parlor was a riot of chintz and gossip. "Jane, it's madness," Mrs. Bantry cried, her hat tilting as she waved a biscuit. "3 fires, all with that wretched seal. Higgs is livid says his ledgers held nothing but receipts. Beatrice swears her manuscript was worthless, just old poetry. And poor Mrs. Lavender's shed, why burn her roses?" Miss Marple's needles paused, her voice gentle but probing. "Nothing valuable, yet the fires were precise. What was in that tin box, Clara?" Mrs. Bantry frowned. "Mrs. Lavender said it held seed packets, but she was cagey. And Beatrice, she's been odd since the library fire, muttering about a lost verse. The constable's useless, blames vagrants." Miss Marple's lips curved faintly. "Vagrants don't leave wax seals. These fires are a message, like the thefts. Any new faces in the village?" Mrs. Bantry's eyes lit up. "Oh, yes. A Mr. Silas Thorne arrived Monday. Calls himself a bookbinder here to restore the church's hymnals. Rented the old forge cottage by the river. Odd man keeps a locked satchel, and I saw him with Miss Finch near the library, whispering. A bookbinder, a locked satchel, and crescent quill. Seals." Miss Marple's pulse quickened. She thanked Clara, her mind threading clues. Fires targeting specific items ledgers, a tin box. A manuscript suggested a hunt for something hidden, perhaps tied to the Knights of the Crescent Quill, whose wax seals had marked both Wren's and Harrow's schemes. Was Thorne their successor, burning evidence to conceal a secret? At St. Bartholomew's Church she found Mr. Clement in the vestry, sorting hymnals with a distracted air. "Miss Marple, these fires are a plague," he sighed. "The bishop's due for the Advent service, and now this. Thorne's been a godsend, though restoring our books with real skill." She settled into a chair, her tone disarming. "Tell me about Mr. Thorne. Has he seen the crypt where the chalice is kept?" Clement blinked. "No, but he asked about our archives, said he's studying medieval manuscripts. He borrowed a history of the parish, returned it with a wax seal crescent. And quill like a bookmark. I thought it quaint." Miss Marple's heart skipped. "May I see the book?" Clement fetched it, a dusty tome titled Annals of St. Bartholomew. Tucked inside was a wax seal, its edges fresh, etched with tiny numbers, 485, a cipher like the chalice case. She thanked him, promising to return the seal, and headed to the village shop. Miss Finch, reorganizing shelves, was pale, her hands trembling. "Beatrice," Miss Marple said softly, "what was in that burned manuscript case?" Miss Finch's eyes darted to the door. "Just poetry, Jane, old ballads worthless. But I found this in the ashes." She produced a charred scrap, stamped with a crescent quill seal. Its wax smudged but intact dot. Miss Marple tucked it away, her mind racing. The fires, the seals, Thorne's arrival threads of a deliberate design. She tested the cipher using the parish history. Page 4, line 8, word 5 yielded script. A second try with a Bible gave fire. A manuscript, burned to hide its secrets. She recalled a village legend, a cursed quill, wielded by the Crescent Quill Order, inscribed a manuscript that foretold ruin if read aloud. Was Thorne seeking it, destroying traces to keep it hidden? The forge cottage, a squat stone building by the river, was her next move. At dusk she approached, her shawl blending with the fog. The windows glowed faintly, and a sharp scent of smoke, not wood, but paper hung in the air. She knocked, posing as a neighbor with a gift of jam. No answer, but a shadow moved inside. Peering through a gap in the shutters, she saw Silas Thorne, a wiry man with ink-stained fingers, burning pages in a grate. A wax seal glinted on his desk beside a locked satchel. A creak sounded behind her. A boy, Tom Price, carrying firewood. "Miss Marple?" he whispered, startled. "You shouldn't be here. Mr. Thorne's not right. He paid me to fetch. Paper said it's for his work, but it smells of trouble." Her voice was calm. "Tom, what's in his satchel?" He hesitated. "Books, old ones. He showed me one a strange script with a crescent mark. Said it's dangerous. Mustn't be read. I saw him burn a page last night." Miss Marple's pulse raced. A cursed manuscript tied to the fires. She sent Tom home, urging silence, and circled the cottage, spotting a cellar window ajar. Slipping inside, she found a damp chamber, its walls lined with crates. One held charred fragments, ledgers, seed packets, a poetry book, all stamped with crescent quill seals. A leather-bound manuscript, its cover etched with a moon and quill, lay half-burned. She opened it, finding verses in Latin interspersed. With numbers, the 3rd of June 10, a cipher within a cipher, footsteps thudded above. Miss Marple hid behind a crate, her heart pounding. Thorne descended, a lantern casting jagged shadows. "Meddling again, old woman?" he snarled, his pistol gleaming. "You've found my secret, but it's too late." Her voice was steady. "The manuscript, Mr. Thorne, it's no relic. It's a forgery, isn't it? You're burning evidence to hide your fraud." Thorne laughed, a bitter edge. "Clever, but wrong. The manuscript's real, cursed by the crescent quill. Its verses summon ruin fires, chaos. I'm protecting the village, destroying it before it's read." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. "Protecting or profiting? Those thefts your work, to fund your escape." Before he could reply, a shout rang out Mrs. Bantry, with Constable Pauk bursting through the cellar door. "Jane, we're here," Mrs. Bantry cried, wielding a broom. Thorne lunged, but Pauk tackled him, cuffs snapping shut. The manuscript was seized, its pages revealing a fraud. No curse, just a coded ledger for a smuggling ring, using the crescent quill legend as cover. The fires ceased, the stolen items returned. At her cottage, Miss Marple knitted, the village calm once more. A new seal arrived. The quill writes on. She burned it, her needles clicking. The syndicate's shadow lingered, but her triumph unmasking Thorne warmed her hearth. St. Mary. Mead was safe for now, and Miss Marple was ready for the next spark. Chapter 18. The Diary of the Silent Quill. The November wind whispered through St. Mary Mead, stirring the bare branches of its ancient elms and casting fleeting shadows across the village green. Miss Jane Marple sat by her cottage hearth, her knitting needles weaving a scarf in muted rows, their rhythmic clack a quiet counterpoint to the village's frosty stillness. At 72, her hands bore the faint quiver of age, but her eyes gleamed with a clarity that cut through deception, like a blade through silk. The sapphire brooch affair, the chalice mystery, the waxen thefts, and the cursed manuscript were triumphs etched into her memory, each a testament to her unyielding curiosity. Yet the crescent quill seal, its latest taunt, the quill writes, "On had arrived 3 days ago, slipped under her door in the dead of night. Its red wax, stamped with a crescent moon, pierced by a quill, was a challenge she could not ignore. St. Mary Mead's calm was a delicate facade, and a new riddle was stirring, its edges sharp with menace. The trouble began with the St. Mary Mead Literary Society, a modest circle of book lovers who met weekly in the church hall to discuss Austen, Dickens, and the occasional Rontu. Over the past fortnight, 3 members had vanished, not in a dramatic exodus, but quietly, like candles snuffed out. Miss Beatrice Finch, the librarian with a tongue sharp as her spectacles. Mr. Arthur Higgs, the grocer whose love for poetry rivaled his zeal for turnips. And young Miss Emily Ward, a schoolteacher with a penchant for Gothic novels, had failed to attend the Society's last 2 meetings. No notes, no farewells, only whispers of odd behavior beforehand. The village buzzed with theories, elopements, feuds, or worse, but Miss Marple sensed a deeper thread, woven with intent. She sipped tea at Mrs. Clara Bantry's, whose parlor overflowed with cushions and gossip. "Jane, it's positively eerie," Mrs. Bantry exclaimed, her hat teetering, as she sliced a fruit-cake. "3 of our best readers gone." Beatrice was planning a talk on persuasion. Higgs was raving about Shelley, and Emily, well, she was dreamy, muttering about a hidden story. And then those dreadful seals. Miss Marple's needles paused, her voice soft but piercing. "Seals, Clara? Like the ones from the thefts and fires?" Mrs. Bantry nodded, fishing a wax seal from her pocket red, stamped with a crescent moon and quill, its edges pristine. "Found this in Beatrice's library desk, tucked in a book. Higgs's wife said he had one, too, in his coat pocket. Emily's landlady found one in her room, under a pillow. It's that wretched crescent quill nonsense again, isn't it?" Miss Marple's pulse quickened. The seals, identical to those of Gideon Wren, Evelyn Harrow, and Silas Thorne, suggested a persistent shadow. "Where were they last seen, Clara?" "At the Literary Society 2 weeks ago," Mrs. Bantry replied. "They were excited about a new member, a Mr. Julian Vale, who joined last month. Calls himself a rare book dealer, lives at Willow Grange, that old house by the meadow. He brought a diary to the meeting, said it was a local relic. They were all agog but secretive after." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. A diary, a stranger, and crescent quill seals threads of a deliberate pattern. She thanked Clara, her mind already tugging at the mystery's edges. The Willow Grange, a Georgian relic half hidden by willows, was an unlikely home for a book dealer. She recalled the village tale. The Grange had once belonged to a recluse, a scribe who vanished in the 1800s, leaving rumors of a diary that held forbidden secrets. Was Vale exploiting this legend as Thorne had with the cursed manuscript? At the church hall, Miss Marple found Mr. Clement, the vicar, sorting chairs from the last society meeting. His face was drawn, his spectacles slipping. "Miss Marple, the society's in tatters," he sighed. "First the chalice, then the fires, now this. Beatrice, Higgs, and Emily were the heart of it. I can't fathom why they'd vanish." Her voice was gentle but probing. "Tell me about Mr. Vale. What was this diary he shared?" Clement frowned, adjusting his glasses. "He's a quiet sort, scholarly, with a limp and a silver cane. The diary was old, leather-bound, with a crescent moon on the cover. He said, "It was written by a local Eliza Gray from the 1820s, full of village secrets." The three were fascinated, stayed late to read it. Vale left a wax seal as a gift, crescent, and quill like a token. I thought it harmless. Miss Marple's heart skipped. "May I see where they met?" Clement led her to a corner table, strewn with books and society notes. Among them she found a scrap of paper, its edge singed, stamped with a crescent quill. Seal. Tiny numbers were etched in the wax. 593, a cipher like the others. She pocketed the seal, promising to return it, and headed to the village library, where Miss Finch's assistant, Elsie, was tidying shelves. "Elsie," Miss Marple said softly, "has Mr. Vale visited recently?" Elsie nodded, eyes wide. "He was here with Miss Finch, looking at old parish records. She was odd after, said something about a silent quill that mustn't speak. Left this in a book." She handed over another wax seal, matching the others. Miss Marple's mind raced. A diary, a silent quill, 3 disappearances. She tested the cipher using the parish history Clement had mentioned. Page 5, line 9, word 3 gave vault. A second try with a Bible yielded secret. A vaulted secret tied to Eliza Gray's diary? She recalled a rumor. The Grange's cellar held a hidden chamber, sealed since Eliza's time, rumored to contain her confessions. Willow Grange was her next move. At dusk she approached its ivy-choked gates, her shawl blending with the twilight. The house loomed, its windows dark, but for a flicker, in an upstairs room. She knocked, posing as a literary society member with a book to lend. No answer but a faint rustle came from the garden. Creeping around, she spotted a figure Julian Vale, lean and limping, his silver cane glinting as he buried something under a willow. A wax seal gleamed in the dirt. She peered through a window, glimpsing a table with a diary leather-bound, crescent moon embossed. Papers beside it listed names: Finch, Higgs, Ward, with sums and pounds. Vale was no dealer, he was extorting. The society using the diary's secrets. Before she could retreat, a dog barked and Vale's head snapped up. "Who's there?" he called, his voice sharp as a blade. Miss Marple ducked behind a hedge, her heart pounding. Vale limped toward her, cane raised, but a shout from the lame Tom Price, delivering firewood, startled him. "Mr. Vale, your order," Tom called, oblivious. Vale retreated, and Miss Marple slipped away, her breath short but her resolve. Firm at her cottage, she examined the seals under a magnifying glass, finding micro-etched letters. SVQ, Silent Quill's Vault. She wired her nephew Raymond, Julian Vale, Willow Grange, St. Mary Mead. Suspect extortion via diary. Crescent quill seals. Alert Interpol. The next day she enlisted Mrs. Bantry, who, eager to redeem her past gullibility, agreed to visit Vale. Posing as a book enthusiast at the Grange, Vale greeted them, his smile thin. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, a pleasure. I'm cataloging rare texts, not taking visitors." Miss Marple's eyes flicked to the diary on his desk. "That's a fine volume, Mr. Vale. Eliza Gray's, I hear, full of village secrets?" Vale's. Lemp faltered, his cane tapping nervously. "A curiosity, nothing more. Old gossip, hardly worth reading." Mrs. Bantry chattered about novels, giving Miss Marple a moment to slip toward the cellar door, ajar behind a curtain. She descended, finding a stone chamber lit by a lantern. The diary's secrets were here: letters, photographs, a ledger listing society members' debts. Vale had blackmailed them, threatening to expose old scandals unless they paid or vanished. Footsteps echoed. Miss Marple hid behind a crate as Vale entered, pistol in hand. "You're relentless old woman," he growled. "Eliza's diary is my fortune, and you won't ruin it." Her voice was steady. "You frightened Beatrice, Higgs, and Emily into hiding, Mr. Vale. The seals give you away. Surrender, and I'll speak for leniency." Vale laughed, raising the gun, but Mrs. Bantry's cry, "Jane, now," rang out. She hurled a vase, shattering it at Vale's feet. Miss Marple swung her umbrella, knocking the pistol free. Constable Pauk, tipped by Raymond's wire, burst in, cuffing Vale. The diary was seized, revealing a fraud. No ancient secrets, just forged confessions to extort the village. Beatrice, Higgs, and Emily returned, shamefaced, but safe, their silence. Bought by fear, the village buzzed with relief, the literary society restored. At her cottage, Miss Marple knitted, a new seal arriving. The quill is never silent. She burned it, her needles clicking. The syndicate's shadow lingered, but her triumph unmasking Vale lit her hearth. St. Mary Mead was hers, and she was ready for the next whisper.